Σήμερα κανονικά θα ήμασταν όλοι από κοντά, γιατί θα ήταν η έναρξη του δεύτερου Ευρωπαϊκού Συνεδρίου. Και αυτές τις ώρες που θα είμαστε στο ίντερνετ και θα κάνουμε αυτό το σεμινάριο, θα ήταν δύο ομιλίες, μία από Αμερικά και μία Ελλάδα. Οπότε, κατά κάποιο τρόπο, έχουμε προσπαθήσει να κρατήσουμε λίγο τη γεύση αυτή που θα υπήρχε και στο Ευρωπαϊκό Συνέδριο. Ο τίτλος του συνεδρίου ήταν Existence and Insecurity και σκόπευα να παρουσιάσω κάτι σχετικά με την τυχαιότητα και την αβεβαιότητα. Δεν θα παρουσιάσω κάτι σχετικά με την τυχαιότητα και την αβεβαιότητα, γιατί έτσι κι αλλιώς τη ζούμε στο πετσί μας αυτό το διάστημα, οπότε δεν χρειάζεται να το θεωρητικοποιήσουμε, είναι πολύ άμεσο. Ανταυτού θα μιλήσω λιγάκι για τον υπαρξισμό και για τις διαφορετικές υπαρξιακές θεωρίες μέσα στον υπαρξισμό. Υπαρξισμός ο οποίος των πραγμάτων λόγω των συνθήκων είναι πιο επίκαιρος από ποτέ, θα έλεγα. Επίσης, αυτό το οποίο είναι ενδιαφέρον είναι ότι Παρασκευή 8 Μαΐου πέρυσι ξεκίνησε το δεύτερο Παγκόσμιο Συνέδριο Υπαρξιακής Ψυχοθεραπείας στο Μπουένος Άιρες, στην Αργεντινή. Κάποιοι από εμάς ήταν εκεί και είχαν την ευκαιρία να παρακολουθήσουν live κάποια από τα πράγματα που έγιναν. Ένα από τα οποία ήταν η παρουσίαση του βιβλίου Existential Therapy, The Wheeler World Handbook, το οποίο ουσιαστικά είναι σαν μια εγκυκλοπαίδεια, η οποία περιλαμβάνει όλες τις υπαρξιακές προσεγγίσεις. Οι editors της έκδοσης αυτής φαίνονται στην φωτογραφία την πλαϊνή. Είναι ο Alfred Lang, είναι ο Kirk Snyder, ο Erik Craig, η Emmy Van Dorsen. Πλάι της είναι η Σινιορέλη, που ήταν η πρόεδρος του συνεδρίου, και ο Digby Tantam. Ο μόνος που λείπει είναι ο Simon Diplock, τον οποίο είχαμε τη χαρά να τον έχουμε στο γίγνεσθε πέρσι τον Νοέμβριο να μας παρουσιάσει για τη βιβλιοθεραπεία, και ο οποίος ήταν υπεύθυνος για το κομμάτι του βιβλίου, ήταν ο editor στο κομμάτι του βιβλίου που αναφερόταν στις εξελίξεις της υπαρξιακής προσέγγισης, και σε αυτό το κεφάλαιο είχαμε την ευκαιρία να συμμετέχουμε και εμείς σαν γίγνεσθε, ως εκπρόσωποι της Ελλάδας, και να παρουσιάσουμε μια βασική έννοια που έχουμε εισαγάγει του υπαρξισμού, που είναι η έννοια του ίστρου. Την έννοια του ίστρου την είχαμε εμπνευστεί από τη λογοτεχνία, κυρίως από το ποίημα του Εμπειρίκου στην Οδό των Φιλελλήνων, όπου λέει ότι οι Έλληνες ταρώ έκαναν ίστρο τη ζωή στο φόβο του θανάτου, αλλά και από τη δουλειά του Καζαντζάκη και το έργο του ο βίος και οι μέρες του Αλέξη Ζορμπά. Αυτό ακριβώς το παρουσιάσαμε στο βιβλίο που εκδόθηκε επίσης πέρσι την ίδια εποχή, με το τεύχος αυτό το Existential Psychotherapy, που λέγεται Existential Psychology East West, είναι ο δεύτερος τόμος, και συμμετείχαμε και η Evgenia, που ήταν από τα ιδρυτικά μέλη του Γίγνεσθε, και ο Αλέξης Χρυσιάδης και η Άννα Ικούρτη και η Κατερίνα Ισίδη, και εγώ έχουμε συμβάλει σε αυτό το τεύχος. Επίσης, στο τεύχος αυτό, στο βιβλίο αυτό του Existential Psychotherapy, συμμετέχουν άλλοι δύο Έλληνες. Ο ένας είναι ο Θανάσης Γεωργάς, ο οποίος έχει γράψει στο κομμάτι του Daeinanalysis και είναι ο πρόεδρος της ελληνικής εταιρείας Daeinanalysis και μέλος του Διοικητικού Συμβουλίου του International Daeinanalysis, και ο Περικλής Καστρινίδης, ο οποίος είναι και αυτός Daeinanalytής, ο οποίος όμως ζει και δουλεύει στην Ελβετία. Τώρα, ξεκινώντας, θα μπορούσαμε να πούμε κάποια βασικά πράγματα για το τι είναι η υπαρξιακή προσέγγιση και ποιες είναι κατά κάποιο τρόπο οι ομοιότητες ανάμεσα στις διαφορετικές προσεγγίσεις. Η υπαρξιακή προσέγγιση είναι, όπως ξέρουμε, μια κατά βάση φιλοσοφική προσέγγιση, η οποία δίνει έμφαση στις σχέσεις και το σχετίζεστε, τον αφαιρμητισμό, την ευελιξία και την ελευθερία από δόγματα, και γι' αυτό μπορεί να συνδυαστεί με πάρα πολλές άλλες θεωρίες και είναι ανοιχτή στις υπόλοιπες προσεγγίσεις. Εμείς σαν Γίγνεστες συνεργαζόμαστε όχι μονάχα με την αδερφή εταιρεία, την Daeinanalysis, αλλά και με το Focusing, αλλά έχουμε κατά καιρούς συνδυαστεί και με την προσωποκεντρική και με την Gestalt. Και γενικώς η υπαρξιακή προσέγγιση, επειδή δεν έχει δικές της τεχνικές, μπορεί να δανειστεί τεχνικές από άλλες προσεγγίσεις, αλλά να έχει και αυτό που ονομάζει ο Μικ Κούπερ μια πλουραλιστική στάση απέναντι στα πράγματα. Δίνει κατά κύριο λόγο έμφαση στις σχέσεις και στο σχετίζεστε, είπαμε, και η υπαρξιακή θεραπεία βασίζεται σε ένα υποστηρικτικό, συνεργατικό διάλογο μεταξύ δύο ανθρώπινων όντων που παλεύουν να διερευνήσουν τη ζωή και τις εμπειρίες του θεραπευόμενου. Αυτό είναι ένα πολύ σημαντικό κομμάτι που αναδεικνύει την ισοτιμία της σχέσης και όχι την έννοια της αυθεντίας του θεραπευτή. Και όπως ξέρουν όλοι όσοι σπουδάζουν και φοιτούν μέσα στο Γίγνεσθε, η έννοια του not knowing, βασικά η ιδέα του Σπινέλη περί του ηλιθίου, ότι ο θεραπευτής είναι ένας ηλίθιος, τουλάχιστον στα αρχικά στάδια της σχέσης, ο οποίος δεν ξέρει τι είναι αυτό που πραγματικά του φέρνει ο άλλος και χρειάζεται να το διερευνήσει μέσα σε αυτό το υποστηρικτικό και συνεργατικό διάλογο. Ο υπαρξιακός θεραπευτής λοιπόν καλλιεργεί μια σχέση φροντίδας, ειλικρίνειας, στήριξης και ενσυναίσθησης, αλλά και αφύπνισης, αναγνωρίζοντας τη σημασία της σχέσης για τη θεραπευτική διαδικασία. Η σημασία της σχέσης είναι κάτι που έχει διερευνηθεί και ερευνητικά. Και νομίζω ότι ανεξαρτήτως προσεγγίσεων, αυτό που θα μπορούσαμε να πούμε ότι θεραπεύει είναι η σχέση. Και το πώς χτίζεται αυτή η σχέση και πώς δημιουργείται αυτή η θεραπευτική συμμαχία είναι ένα πάρα πολύ σημαντικό κεφάλαιο της εκπαίδευσης. Η κοινή θεραπευτική πρακτική είναι η φαινομενολογική μέθοδος, στην οποία ο θεραπευτής επιδιώκει να είναι όσο το δυνατόν περισσότερο παρόν, σε σύνδεση με το θεραπευόμενο και ελεύθερος από προσδοκίες. Έτσι, οπότε, ανεξαρτήτως από των διαφόρων θεωριών που θα σας παρουσιάσω μετά, νομίζω ότι υπάρχει αυτή η κοινή πρακτική της φαινομενολογικής μεθόδου, η οποία είναι πάρα πολύ σημαντική Γιατί ακριβώς δίνει σημασία στο φαινόμενο, όπως αυτό αναδύεται από μόνο του. Ο σκοπός της υπαρξιακής θεραπείας είναι να φωτίσει τον τρόπο με τον οποίο κάθε μοναδικό άτομο, μέσα σε κάποιες αναπόφευκτες συνθήκες και περιορισμούς, επιλέγει, δημιουργεί και διαιωνίζει τον τρόπο με τον οποίο βρίσκεται μέσα στον κόσμο, διερευνώντας τη βιωμένη εμπειρία του όσο πιο ειλικρινά, ανοιχτά και εμπεριστατωμένα γίνεται στη συγκεκριμένη στιγμή στη ζωή του. Έτσι, οπότε ένας βασικός στόχος είναι η διερεύνηση. Είναι το να μπορέσουμε να φωτίσουμε τον τρόπο με τον οποίο ζούμε, τον τρόπο με τον οποίο είμαστε, τον τρόπο με τον οποίο αντιλαμβανόμαστε τα πράγματα, χωρίς να το κρίνουμε. Αυτό βέβαια ξεκινάει κυρίως από τον θεραπευτή, ο οποίος χρειάζεται να έχει αυτή τη στάση της ανοιχτότητας και της μη επικριτικής στάσης απέναντι στα πράγματα. Η υπαρξιακή θεραπεία δεν υπόσχεται εύκολες λύσεις. Πιστεύει στην επίμονη και θαραλέα προσπάθεια και στη θέληση, διάθεση να κοιτάξει κανείς κατάματα τη σκοτεινή πλευρά της ύπαρξης και της ζωής. Αυτό θα λέγαμε ότι είναι ίσως και μια αρκετά διαφορετική στάση σε σχέση, ας πούμε, με τη θετική ψυχολογία, αν και η θετική ψυχολογία πλέον αναφέρεται και στις σκοτεινές πλευρές. Αλλά για να μπορέσουμε πραγματικά να δούμε τη ζωή μας, χρειάζεται να μπορέσουμε να τη δούμε ολόκληρη. Χρειάζεται να μπορέσουμε να δούμε κυρίως, θα έλεγα, αυτά που μας ενοχλούν, αυτά που δεν θέλουμε συνήθως να δούμε. Πριν περάσω σε αυτό, αλλά πώς το κάνουμε αυτό, πώς μπορούμε να διερευνήσουμε αυτές τις σκοτεινές πλευρές που μας ταλαιπωρούν. Ακριβώς εκεί αναφέρεται και ο Erik Craig και δεν ξέρω, ίσως να το αναφέρει και μετά όταν θα συνδεθεί μαζί μας. Είναι η έννοια του sanctuary. Η δημιουργία ακριβώς ενός πλαισίου που είναι ένα άβατον, είναι ένας χώρος μέσα στον οποίο λειτουργούμε με πολύ σεβασμό και φυσικά με πολύ εχεμήθεια απέναντι σε αυτά που φέρνει ο άλλος, για να μπορέσουμε να χτίσουμε σιγά σιγά την εμπιστοσύνη μεταξύ μας, έτσι ώστε ακριβώς να μπορεί ο άλλος να ανοιχτεί και να μοιραστεί και αυτά τα οποία, για τα οποία ντρέπεται, για αυτά για τα οποία αισθάνεται πάρα πολύ άβολα με τον εαυτό του και που πολλές φορές δυσκολεύεται να τα εκμυστηριευτεί ακόμα και στον ίδιο τον εαυτό. Τώρα, η υπαρξιακή προσέγγιση, όπως βλέπετε σε αυτόν τον πίνακα, θα μπορούσαμε να πούμε ότι αποτελείται από 4 σχολές, 4 κύριες κατευθύνσεις. Την Daeinanalysis, την υπαρξιακή φαινομενολογική ή όπως ήταν παλιότερα γνωστή τη Βρετανική σχολή, την υπαρξιακή ανθρωπιστική και υπαρξιακή συνθετική που πολλές φορές αναφέρεται ως η Αμερικάνικη σχολή και τη λογοθεραπεία η οποία έχει, του Βίκτορ Φράνκλ, η οποία έχει εξελιχθεί και σε αυτό που ονομάζεται Existential Analysis. Τώρα, όπως βλέπετε κάτω από την Daeinanalysis έχω βάλει το όνομα του Binswanger και του Bosch, γιατί ήταν οι 2 βασικοί ιδρυτές και στην ουσία η υπαρξιακή προσέγγιση ξεκίνησε από την Daeinanalysis, ξεκίνησε από τον Binswanger και τον Bosch, οι οποίοι ήταν και οι 2 ψυχαναλυτές και βαθύτερα επηρεασμένοι βεβαίως από το Freud. Αλλά κάτι τους έλειπε, κάτι δεν τους ικανοποιούσε. Η γνωριμία με τον Heidegger ήταν καθοριστική και για τους 2 και κυρίως βέβαια για τον Bosch, ο οποίος έκανε μία σειρά από σεμινάρια με ψυχιάτρους με την παρουσία του Heidegger, τα περίφημα Ontological Seminars, τα οποία είχαμε τη χαρά επίσης μαζί με τις δύο εταιρείες, την Daeinanalysis και το Focusing, να τα μεταφράσουμε και να τα εκδώσουμε στα ελληνικά, ένα τεράστιο έργο και πολύ αξιόλογο για να μελετηθεί, αλλά αναμφίβολα και αρκετά δύσκολο, όπως είναι και η θεωρία του Heidegger, δύσκολο να κατανοηθεί. Γι' αυτό επίσης πολλές φορές κάνουμε αυτά τα σεμινάρια τρεις εταιρείες με τον καθηγητή, τον κύριο Ξεροπαΐδη, προσπαθώντας να καταλάβουμε περισσότερο όλες αυτές τις φιλοσοφικές θεωρίες και κυρίως τον Heidegger. Στο βιβλίο αυτό στο οποίο αναφέρθηκα, το Handbook of Existential Therapy, στο κομμάτι της Daeinanalysis γράφουν κυρίως η Alice Holzhey και ο Erik Craig. Alice Holzhey, η οποία φαίνεται να έχει κατά κάποιο τρόπο δημιουργήσει και μια δική της κατεύθυνση, παίρνοντας κάποια καινούργια στοιχεία μέσα στην Daeinanalysis. Το αυτό βέβαια και ο Erik Craig, ο οποίος έχει συνθέσει και ένα μεγάλο κομμάτι από την εμπειρία του με το Relational Therapy και το Psychotherapy, μιας και έχει αρκετή επαφή με την Κορέα και με Κορεάτες ψυχιάτρους. Μετά έχουμε λοιπόν την Αγγλική σχολή που ξεκίνησε με τον Άρντι Λέγκ και ένας επίσης σημαντικός, ο Hans Kohn, και οι σύγχρονοι που τους έχουμε μεταφράσει και βιβλία τους και τους έχουμε φέρει και στην Ελλάδα, η Έμι Βαντόσεν και ο Ερνέστο Σπινέλη. Η Αμερικάνικη σχολή ξεκίνησε από τον Ρόλο Μέι, ο οποίος είχε ζήσει στην Ευρώπη αρκετά χρόνια και γυρνώντας στην Αμερική κατά κάποιο τρόπο μετέφερε αρκετές από τις ιδέες του υπαρξισμού στην Αμερική και επηρέασε πάρα πολύ το ανθρωπιστικό κίνημα, αυτό που πολλές φορές ονομάζεται το τρίτο ρεύμα στην ψυχολογία, είναι η ψυχανάλυση, ο behaviorισμός και ο ανθρωπισμός. Και φυσικά επηρέασε και τον James Bugendal και τον Clark Moustakas και οι τρεις έχουν συνεισφέρει πάρα πολύ στην ανάπτυξη της υπαρξιακής ανθρωπιστικής, όπως και οι πιο σύγχρονοι, ο Irving Yalom και ο Kirk Snyder. Και τέλος, βέβαια, η λογοθεραπεία που είναι αρκετά γνωστή και ευρέως διαδεδομένη σε όλο τον κόσμο, χάρη στη δουλειά του Βίκτορ Φράνκλ, τον οποίο φαντάζομαι περισσότεροι γνωρίζετε σε σχέση με το έργο του που είχε βγει από τα στρατόπεδα συγκέντρωσης και έγραψε το πρώτο του σημαντικό βιβλίο, το Man's Search for Meaning, το οποίο οδήγησε σε μια ολόκληρη σειρά έργων και φυσικά σε όλη αυτή την προσέγγιση που το κύριο μέλημα και η μεγαλύτερη βαρύτητα είναι στο νόημα της ζωής. Είναι το νόημα της ζωής. Αυτό ο Βίκτορ Φράνκλ, Βιενέζος, ψυχίατρος, έχει αναπτυχθεί περαιτέρω από το έργο του Untitled Chapter, που επίσης είναι στην Αυστρία. Να πούμε λοιπόν δύο-τρία πράγματα. Δεν θα μιλήσω πολύ για την Daeinanalysis, γιατί φυσικά θα μιλήσει ο Erik Craig, οπότε εδώ οφείλω. Αλλά ήθελα να πω ότι πέρα από το ότι είναι η πρώτη συστηματική προσέγγιση στην υπαρξιακή ψυχοθεραπεία και παραμένει πλέον οντολογική, η έννοια της οντολογικής θεωρίας είναι πάρα πολύ σημαντική και ο Erik Craig έχει γράψει ένα πολύ ενδιαφέρον άρθρο που λέγεται Distinguishing Apples from Trees, προσπαθώντας ακριβώς να εξηγήσει το γιατί είναι τόσο πολύ σημαντική η οντολογική ματιά και λέει, απλά δύο βασικά σημεία θα φέρω, ότι ενώνει τους θεραπευτικούς συνεταίρους, τον θεραπευόμενο και τον θεραπευτή δηλαδή, σαν ισότιμους στην ανθρώπινη υπόστασή τους και επιτρέπει ακόμα και στο πιο δυσκολεμένο άτομο να κατανοηθεί και να κατανοήσει τον εαυτό του σαν ανθρώπινο όν που κατά βάση είναι όπως όλοι οι άλλοι. Νομίζω ότι αυτό είναι πολύ σημαντικό. Ο Μπίλσβαγκερ ήταν ο πρώτος ο οποίος επηρεάστηκε από τον Χάιντεγκερ και προσπάθησε να αναπτύξει μια επιστημονική βάση για την ψυχιατρική και την ψυχοπαθολογία κυρίως, ενώ ο Μπος ανέπτυξε μια βάση για την ψυχοθεραπευτική πρακτική. Και οι δύο θέλησαν να αναθεωρήσουν την ψυχαναλυτική θεωρία, χρησιμοποιώντας τη φαινομενολογική ερμηνευτική ανάλυση του ανθρώπινου όντως, του Χάιντεγκερ, ο οποίος βέβαια είχε βασιστεί και είχε επηρεαστεί από το έργο του Χούσελ. Μπορούσαμε να πούμε ότι ήταν ο πρώτος φαινομενολόγος. Dasein σημαίνει παρουσία, ύπαρξη όν, το είδος του όντως, της ύπαρξης, που μπορεί να καταλάβει το όν, κεφαλαίο, την ύπαρξη, συμπεριλαμβανομένης και της δικής του ύπαρξης, και το οποίο υπάρχει εκεί έξω, εν το κόσμο, και αδιαχώριστο από αυτόν. Η λέξη ανάλυσης προέρχεται από το ελληνικό ρήμα αναλύειν, που σημαίνει το ξετύλιγμα, το ξέσφυγμα, το χαλάρωμα του πιο πρωταρχικού νοήματος των πραγμάτων. Οπότε η Dasein-ανάλυσης είναι μια ερμηνευτική διαδικασία, μέσα από την οποία απελευθερώνεται το ανθρώπινο όν, για να διεκδικήσει το δικαίωμά του να είναι και να αγκαλιάσει τις δυνατότητές του για μια πιο πλήρη, ελεύθερη και αυθεντική ύπαρξη στον κόσμο. Τώρα να πω, είπα δεν θα τολμήσω να εμβαθύνω περισσότερο σε όλο αυτό. Φαντάζομαι ότι αυτό θα το κάνει ο Erik Craig μετά. Να μπω πιο πολύ στην υπαρξιακή φαινομενολογική προσέγγιση, που, όπως είπαμε, ονομάζεται και Βρετανική σχολή. Το κομμάτι αυτό του βιβλίου του World Handbook ήταν edited από την Emmy Van Dorsen, η οποία αναφέρει ότι οι βαθύτερες ρίζες της υπαρξιακής φαινομενολογικής προσέγγισης είναι στην αρχαία Ελλάδα και την ανάπτυξη της φιλοσοφίας από τους προσοκρατικούς, τον Σοκράτη, τον Πλάτωνα και τον Αριστοτέλη. Στη διαλεκτική και μευτική μέθοδο του Σοκράτη και στη διαλεκτική αργότερα του Χέγκελ βασίζεται, και η διαλεκτική θέαση του κόσμου μας επιτρέπει να αντιληφθούμε την πολυπλοκότητα και την πολλαπλότητα των πραγμάτων και αποδέχεται πως οι ιδέες είναι συχνά παράδοξες και αντιφατικές, δημιουργώντας διλήμματα και συγκρούσεις. Ο υπαρξιακός φαινομενολόγος θεραπευτής μπαίνει σε ένα αληθινό διάλογο, σε μια ειλικρινή προσπάθεια να εξετάσει με προσοχή τον κόσμο του άλλου. Η υπαρξιακή φαινομενολογική ψυχοθεραπεία είναι μια προσέγγιση που λαμβάνει υπόψη της τα φαινόμενα που παρουσιάζει ο θεραπευόμενος και προσεκτικά τα περιγράφει και τα ερευνά για να δει αυτό που εμφανίζεται. Ουσιαστικά αυτό ήταν και αυτό που έλεγε ο Χούσελ με τη φαινομενολογική μέθοδο. Να αφήσουμε τα πράγματα να εμφανιστούν από μόνα τους, να δείξουν από μόνα τους αυτό το οποίο είναι. Προσπαθώντας να βάλουμε σε παρένθεση τις δικές μας πεποιθήσεις, τις δικές μας ιδέες, τις δικές μας προκαταλήψεις. Αυτό βέβαια πιο εύκολα λέγεται, πιο δύσκολα γίνεται. Η υπαρξιακή φαινομενολογική προσέγγιση έχει επηρεαστεί όχι μόνο από τον Χούσελ και τον Χάιντεγκερ, έχει επηρεαστεί και από τον Κίρκεγκαρ και από τον Νίτσε και από τον Σάρτρ και από πολλούς άλλους μελοποντή, από πολλούς φιλοσόφους. Έτσι, οπότε, ενώ στη Dasein-ανάλυση η κύρια επίδραση είναι από τη φαινομενολογική μέθοδο, την ερμηνευτική του Χάιντεγκερ, εδώ βλέπουμε ότι οι φιλοσοφικές επιρροές είναι πολύ ευρύτερες. Ο Κίρκεγκαρ, ο οποίος έχω διαλέξει κάποια βασικά που εμένα μου λένε κάποια πράγματα, ότι ο άνθρωπος χρειάζεται να τολμήσει να σταθεί έξω από το πλήθος και να διεκδικήσει τη θέση του ως άτομο, να κάνει αυτό που λέει το άλμα πίστης προς μια πιο συνειδητή και ευσεβή ζωή, ξεπερνώντας τις αντιθέσεις και παλεύοντας με τη μοίρα. Ο Νίτσε έχει φέρει, είχαμε ένα σεμινάριο για τον Νίτσε και μιλήσαμε εκτενώς για τον Νίτσε, αλλά θα μείνω λίγο στη θέληση για δύναμη, γιατί είναι μια παρεξηγημένη έννοια, που πολλές φορές τον συνέδεσε και με τον ναζισμό, ενώ εκείνος δεν αναφερόταν καθόλου σε αυτό. Η θέληση για δύναμη σπρώχνει τον άνθρωπο να εξελιχθεί και να αποκτήσει την ψυχική κατάσταση που θα του επιτρέψει να ζήσει με επίγνωση και την ελευθερία να αποφασίζει για τον εαυτό του, μιας και ο Θεός έχει πεθάνει. Ο Σάρτρ, επίσης μια βασική επιρροή, ο οποίος αναφέρει ότι είμαστε οι επιλογές μας, τι μπορούμε να κάνουμε εμείς για τον κόσμο και όχι τι μπορεί να κάνει ο κόσμος για εμάς, είναι το βασικό ερώτημα για εκείνον. Και ακόμα και όταν δεν αποφασίζουμε, και πάλι αποφασίζουμε. Δηλαδή και η στάση της αποχής και της μη απόφασης είναι απόφαση. Έτσι, οπότε ποτέ δεν μπορούμε να πούμε ότι δεν επιλέγουμε. Ακόμα και όταν δεν επιλέγουμε, πάλι επιλέγουμε. Επιλέγουμε να μην επιλέξουμε. Ο Χούρσελ ήταν, όπως είπα, ο πρώτος που χρησιμοποίησε τη φαινομενολογική μέθοδο για την εξέταση της ανθρώπινης ύπαρξης και συνείδησης, και ο Χάιντεγκερ έδωσε μεγάλη έμφαση στην ανάλυση ολόκληρου του κόσμου της ανθρώπινης ύπαρξης και όχι την εσωτερική ψυχή. Αυτό είναι και μια πολύ μεγάλη διαφορά από άλλες ψυχολογίες του βάθους, ψυχοθεραπείες του βάθους, γιατί οι περισσότερες ψυχοθεραπείες μιλάνε για την ενδοπροσωπική ζωή και αυτό που συμβαίνει ενδοψυχικά, ενώ ουσιαστικά, αν το έχω καταλάβει καλά, η Daeinanalysis, βασισμένη ακριβώς στον Heidegger, δίνει μεγαλύτερη έμφαση όχι τόσο πολύ στην εσωτερική ψυχή, αλλά στο κομμάτι της σύνδεσης του ανθρώπου με τον κόσμο, με ολόκληρο τον κόσμο. Όχι μόνο με τους άλλους, αλλά με τα πάντα. Με τα ζώα, με τη φύση, με όλο αυτό που είναι εκεί έξω και εμείς είμαστε εκεί έξω. Τώρα, μερικά λόγια για την υπαρξιακή ανθρωπιστική, υπαρξιακή συνθετική, που όπως είπα ονομάζεται και το αμερικάνικο ρεύμα, μια αμερικάνικη σχολή, και είναι ένα μείγμα τόσο των ανθρωπιστικών ιδεών της ψυχολογίας, όσο και της ευρωπαϊκής υπαρξιακής φιλοσοφίας. Η ανθρωπιστική ψυχολογία, που ονομάστηκε και τρίτη δύναμη, όπως ανέφερα πριν, ξεκίνησε τη δεκαετία του 50 από τον Μάσλο και τον Ρότζερς και τον Μουστάκας, τον Κλάρκ Μουστάκας, ο οποίος ήταν και μια πολύ βασική επιρροή στη ζωή του Erik Craig. Και το 1958 εκδόθηκε από το Ρόλο Μέι το βιβλίο Existence, που εισήγαγε τη φαινομενολογική μέθοδο στην Αμερική, ουσιαστικά. Διαφορετικά από την ανθρωπιστική προσέγγιση, που δίνει έμφαση στις δυνατότητες του ανθρώπου, η υπαρξιακή ανθρωπιστική φέρνει μια ισορροπία στην κατανόηση των δυνατοτήτων και της αυτοπραγμάτωσης, αλλά εισάγει και τους περιορισμούς, καθώς και τη δαιμονική πλευρά του ανθρώπου. Γιατί η ανθρωπιστική πλευρά, ο Μάσλο, η ανθρωπιστική σχολή, με κύριον προπάτορα, ας πούμε, τον Μάσλο, μίλαγε για την έννοια της αυτοπραγμάτωσης, ότι ο άνθρωπος έχει μέσα του τα θετικά στοιχεία, γι' αυτό ονομάζεται και ανθρωπισμός, έτσι. Ότι ο άνθρωπος εξελίσσεται προς κάτι θετικό και έχει τη δυνατότητα της αυτοπραγμάτωσης. Οπότε έχει μια πιο θετική στάση απέναντι στον άνθρωπο και στα πράγματα. Η υπαρξιακή προσέγγιση από την άλλη μεριά φέρνει, όπως είπαμε, και την πιο σκοτεινή πλευρά του ανθρώπου. Και ο Ρόλο Μέι μίλησε πολύ για αυτή τη δαιμονική πλευρά. Η υπαρξιακή ανθρωπιστική ψυχοθεραπεία είναι μια δυναμική διαδικασία του γίγνεσθε και του γνώθης αυτών. Ωραία, οπότε ο Ρόλομεϊ, όπως είπα, και οι Ευρωπαίοι ακαδημαϊκοί έβαλαν τις φιλοσοφικές βάσεις της υπαρξιακής ανθρωπιστικής. Ο Μπούκενταλ προσπάθησε να αναπτύξει πιο πολύ την εφαρμογή της φιλοσοφίας στην καθημερινή πρακτική της θεραπείας. Οπότε ο Ρόλομεϊ ήταν πιο πολύ θεωρητικός. Ο James Μπούκενταλ όμως προσπάθησε να δει πώς όλες αυτές οι θεωρίες μπορούν να εφαρμοστούν στην πράξη. Ο Erik Craig, από την άλλη μεριά, ήταν αυτός που την έκανε γνωστή στο ευρύτερο κοινό, κυρίως λόγω των μυθιστορημάτων του, αλλά στην Αμερική τουλάχιστον και χάρη σε ένα πολύ σημαντικό βιβλίο, το Existential Psychotherapy, που εκδόθηκε το 1980, και θα σας πω ίσως λίγο παραπάνω αμέσως μετά γι' αυτό. Η υπαρξιακή ανθρωπιστική προσέγγιση δίνει ιδιαίτερη έμφαση στην παρουσία του θεραπευτή, στη σχέση εγώ-εσύ, επηρεασμένη πάρα πολύ από τη φιλοσοφία του Μπούμπερ. Η έννοια του presence είναι από τα λατινικά prae, before, και esse, to be. To be before, to be present, to be there. Η πραγματική συνάντηση σημαίνει ότι θεραπευτής και θεραπευόμενος είναι παρόντες με ενσυνειδητότητα, αποδοχή, διαθεσιμότητα και την εκφραστικότητά τους με όλη τους την ύπαρξη. Η κύρια επιδίωξη της υπαρξιακής ανθρωπιστικής ψυχοθεραπείας είναι, όπως λέει ο Ρόλομεϊ, να ελευθερώσει τον θεραπευόμενο. Η ελευθερία είναι πάντα μέσα σε ένα πλαίσιο φυσικών και κοινωνικών περιορισμών. Η ελευθερία να δράσει και να κάνει κανείς πράγματα σχετίζεται με εξωτερικές σωματικές αποφάσεις, ενώ η ελευθερία να είναι, έτσι, και να υιοθετεί κανείς στάσεις εσωτερικές, νοητικές και συναισθηματικές. Οπότε, ο Ρόλομεϊ αναφέρεται δηλαδή σε δύο είδη ελευθερίας. Την ελευθερία μας για δράση, για να κάνουμε πράγματα, αλλά και στην ελευθερία μας να είμαστε. Τι στάση κρατάμε απέναντι στα πράγματα. Κάθε ελεύθερη επιλογή, λέει ο Ρόλομεϊ, έχει το τίμημά της και το ισοδύναμά της στο πεπρωμένο. Συμπαντικό, γενετικό, πολιτισμικό και περιστασιακό πεπρωμένο. Έτσι, οπότε δεν είμαστε ελεύθεροι, όπως και διαπιστώνουμε και αυτή τη στιγμή με το COVID-19, δεν είμαστε ελεύθεροι από συνθήκες και από περιστάσεις και από γεγονότα, είτε αυτά είναι συμπαντικά, είτε είναι γενετικά, είτε είναι πολιτισμικά, είτε είναι περιστασιακά τυχαία γεγονότα. Όλοι ζούμε μέσα σε ένα πλαίσιο και έχουμε περιορισμούς. Οι υπαρξιακοί ανθρωπιστικοί θεραπευτές δίνουν έμφαση στην παρούσα εμπειρία του παρελθόντος και χρησιμοποιούν ιδιαίτερα τη σωματική βιωμένη εμπειρία τόσο του θεραπευόμενου όσο και του θεραπευτή. Να κάνω μια σύντομη αναφορά στον Irving Yalom. Όχι για κανέναν άλλο λόγο, αλλά γιατί εγώ τουλάχιστον βρέθηκα στον υπαρξισμό εξαιτίας του. Οπότε, για μένα έχει υπάρξει πολύ σημαντικό αυτό το βιβλίο που σας είπα, το Existential Psychotherapy. Ήταν το πρώτο βιβλίο, ουσιαστικά, πριν από το Ρόλομεϊ, πριν να διαβάσω το Existence του Ρόλομεϊ, που με επηρέασε και απάντησε αρκετά από τα ερωτήματά μου της τότε εποχής, που ως νέα αναζητούσα απαντήσεις σε διάφορα θέματα που με απασχολούσαν, και ο οποίος μιλάει για 4 βασικές υπαρξιακές ανησυχίες: το θάνατο, την ελευθερία, την απομόνωση και την έλλειψη νοήματος. Βέβαια, όπως μας έλεγε ο Erik Craig, αυτά δεν είναι οντολογικά θέματα, είναι οντικά θέματα, γιατί δεν βιώνουμε το θάνατο. Όπως τα έλεγε και ο Επίκουρος, όταν ο θάνατος είναι εδώ, δεν είμαι εγώ εδώ, και όταν είμαι εγώ εδώ, δεν είναι ο θάνατος εδώ. Άρα δεν είναι ένα οντολογικό δεδομένο. Αυτό που είναι το οντολογικό δεδομένο είναι ότι είμαστε προς θάνατον Και αυτό ανασύρει βέβαια διάφορες ανησυχίες και διάφορα άγχη και αγωνίες, όπως και στη σημερινή, την τωρινή περίοδο που διανύουμε, όπου έχει έρθει πολύ έντονο στο προσκήνιο η ανασφάλεια για την φυσική μας ύπαρξη. Η ελευθερία που στην ουσία συμπεριέχει δύο έννοιες, την ευθύνη και τη θέληση. Και για μένα ήταν πολύ σημαντικό το να μπορέσω να αντιληφθώ ότι η ελευθερία είναι μέσα σε περιορισμούς και να μπορέσω να αντιληφθώ αυτό το δίπολο περιορισμή ελευθερία. Η απομόνωση στην οποία αναφέρεται με τρεις διαφορετικές μορφές, την διαπροσωπική απομόνωση που έχει να κάνει με την κακή μας σχέση με τους άλλους ανθρώπους, την ενδοψυχική, η οποία αναφέρεται στην κακή σχέση που μπορεί να έχουμε με τον εαυτό μας, και την υπαρξιακή, η οποία είναι αυτό το γεγονός ότι όλοι αποτελούμαστε από δέρμα και ως εκ τούτου είμαστε διαχωρισμένοι φυσικά, σε φυσικό επίπεδο, είμαστε ξέχωρες και μοναδικές οντότητες, οι οποίες αναγκαστικά φέρουν την ευθύνη της ύπαρξής τους και κανένας άλλος δεν μπορεί στην ουσία να πάρει τη θέση μας ούτε στη ζωή ούτε στο θάνατο. Και ο Ερβινιάλο επίσης αναφέρεται στην έλλειψη νοήματος. Εγώ θα μπορούσα να πω πλέον ως προς αυτή την πάλη μας ανάμεσα στο νόημα και στο μη νόημα. Σε αυτό και πάλι το δίπολο υπάρχουν πάρα πολλά πράγματα τα οποία νοηματοδοτούν τη ζωή και πάρα πολλά πράγματα που ανάλογα με την ψυχική μας διάθεση, θα έλεγα, κινούμαστε ανάμεσα στο να νιώθουμε ότι όλα έχουν νόημα και τίποτα δεν έχει νόημα. Αλλά όπως ανέφερα, δεν ξέρω αν το ανέφερα, ο Ερβινιάλο ήταν και αυτός είναι ψυχίατρος και ψυχαναλυτής, πιστεύει στις ενδοψυχικές συγκρούσεις, οπότε αναφέρεται σε ένα μοντέλο ουσιαστικά ψυχοδυναμικό, όπου απλά αντικαθιστά τις εσωτερικές συγκρούσεις, αντί να είναι οι εσωτερικές συγκρούσεις να πηγάζουν από τα ένστικτα, όπως έφερνε ο Φρόιντ, ουσιαστικά οι εσωτερικές συγκρούσεις πηγάζουν από την επίγνωση αυτών των βασικών υπαρξιακών ανησυχιών. Και αυτές οι συγκρούσεις έχουν ως αποτέλεσμα το άγχος και την ψυχοπαθολογία. Τέλος, να πω δύο λόγια για τη λογοθεραπεία και την υπαρξιακή ανάλυση. Όπως είπε ο Βίκτορ Φράνκλ, ήταν αυτός που ο ιδρυτής της λογοθεραπείας και είχε ως πρωταρχικό του στόχο να πολεμήσει αυτό που ονόμαζε psychologism, μία μειωτική θέαση του ανθρώπου, όπως έλεγε εκείνος, και να προάγει την πνευματική, νοητική διάστασή του, και γι' αυτό ήθελε να αναπτύξει μια ψυχολογία του ύψους, δηλαδή του βάθους. Η τρίτη βιενέζικη σχολή, η λογοθεραπεία θεωρείται η τρίτη βιενέζικη σχολή, όπου η θέληση για νόημα δίνει τη θέση της στην θέληση για ευχαρίστηση του Φρόιντ ή τη θέληση για δύναμη του Άντλερ. Επηρέασε βαθύτατα όχι μόνο την αυστριακή και ευρωπαϊκή σκέψη, αλλά όταν βρέθηκε στην Αμερική μετά τον Δεύτερο Παγκόσμιο Πόλεμο, ο Βίκτορ Φράνκλ αναπτύχθηκε πάρα πολύ και στην Αμερική και έχει εξαπλωθεί και στη Λατινική Αμερική και γενικότερα σε όλο τον κόσμο. Η έμφαση της λογοθεραπείας είναι να βοηθήσει στην ανέβρεση νοήματος και αξιών στον κόσμο, υπερβαίνοντας τον εαυτό. Επηρεάστηκε από τον Κίρκεγκαρντ και την φαινομενολογία των αξιών του Μάρξ Σέλερ. Το 1990 ξεκίνησε μια αλλαγή στη λογοθεραπεία για την υπαρξιακή ανάλυση του Φράνκλ από τον Λάνγκ, χρησιμοποιώντας περισσότερο τη φαινομενολογική προσέγγιση, την οποία πρέπει να πω σε παρένθεση ότι δεν τη χρησιμοποιώ σε καθόλου εδώ το πράγμα, και την προσωποκεντρική. Ο Άλφρεντ Λάγκλι δηλαδή συνδύασε την προσωποκεντρική με την φαινομενολογική και έδωσε πολύ μεγαλύτερη έμφαση στο να ζει κανείς με εσωτερική συνένεση σε μια διαλογική σχέση με τον κόσμο. Οπότε η κύρια έννοια για εκείνον δεν είναι πλέον η ανέβρεση νοήματος, αλλά η ανέβρεση εσωτερικής συνένεσης. Η ανθρώπινη ύπαρξη χαρακτηρίζεται από τη δυνατότητα να αποφασίζει κανείς αυθεντικά, να είναι συνειδητός της ελευθερίας και της ευθύνης του, έχοντας τη δυνατότητα να επιλέξει. Αυτή η δυνατότητα αποτελεί τη θέληση και παρέχει τα μέσα για την εκπλήρωση της ουσίας του. Τώρα, πριν κλείσω και συνδεθούμε και με τον Erik Craig, να πω δύο βασικά πράγματα από το άρθρο του A Brief Overview of Existential Psychotherapy, που εκδόθηκε στο περιοδικό Humanistic Psychology, για τα κοινά σημεία των υπαρξιακών θεραπευτών. Βασικά, όλοι οι υπαρξιακοί θεραπευτές αναρωτιούνται το τι σημαίνει να είναι κανείς άνθρωπος, τι σημαίνει να είναι ανθρώπινο όν, τι είναι αυτό που μας κάνει ανθρώπους, τι μας διαφοροποιεί από άλλες μορφές ύπαρξης. Επίσης, ένα βασικό κομμάτι το οποίο αναρωτιέται ένας υπαρξιακός θεραπευτής, τι είναι το δικό μου. Το τι σημαίνει να είσαι άνθρωπος δεν μπορεί να έχει μόνο μια γενική εξήγηση, αλλά χρειάζεται μια προσωπική απάντηση. Οπότε χρειάζεται να έχουμε την οντολογική ματιά, αλλά χρειάζεται να μπορέσουμε ακριβώς να πάρουμε και την ευθύνη της προσωπικής απάντησης, το πώς εμείς είναι αυτό που είναι το δικό μας. Στο ερώτημα της ύπαρξης, ο υπαρξιακός θεραπευτής ενδιαφέρεται να καταλάβει την ύπαρξη και όχι την ψυχή. Δηλαδή, την ολότητα της ύπαρξης, όπως βρίσκεται εν το κόσμο, και όπως ανέφερα πριν, όχι το ενδοψυχικό κομμάτι, έτσι, αλλά την ολότητα της ύπαρξής του. Όπως επίσης ενδιαφέρεται για τη βιωμένη εμπειρία του θεραπευόμενου. Και γι' αυτό βασίζεται στην περιγραφή συγκεκριμένων σε πρώτο πρόσωπο εμπειριών. Και γι' αυτό, όπως ξέρετε, πάρα πολύ ρωτάμε πώς είναι αυτό για σένα. Πώς νιώθεις εσύ με αυτό. Πού το νιώθεις αυτό στο σώμα σου. Και τα λοιπά και τα λοιπά. Επίσης, ο υπαρξιακός θεραπευτής χρησιμοποιεί τη φαινομενολογική μέθοδο, δηλαδή προσπαθεί να μειώσει τις όποιες προκατασκευασμένες ιδέες και αντιλήψεις έχει, έτσι ώστε να αφήσει τα πράγματα να μιλήσουν για τον εαυτό του. Στοχεύει στην επανόρθωση του πραγματικού, την επαφή, επίγνωση, αναγνώριση και αποδοχή αυτού που είναι δικό μου, στον πιο αυθεντικό και προσωπικό τρόπο βίωσης της ζωής. Ο υπαρξιακός θεραπευτής δίνει έμφαση στην πραγματική και παρούσα σχέση και όχι στη μεταβίβαση. Έτσι, μεταβίβαση είναι μια έννοια ψυχαναλυτική. Δίνει επίσης μεγαλύτερη έμφαση στο συνειδητό, την ελευθερία, την επιλογή και την ευθύνη. Δεν ξέρω αν έχει συνδεθεί ο Έρικ ή αν δεν έχει συνδεθεί, αν θέλετε να... αν υπάρχουν ερωτήσεις ή κάτι που θα θέλατε να αναφέρετε. Στέλνω και ένα μήνυμα στον Έρικ εντωμεταξύ. Σκεφτείτε τι θέλετε να πείτε, αν έχετε κάτι που θα θέλατε να Δεν το καταλάβατε ή κάτι που θα θέλετε να μοιραστείτε πιθανόν. Μη στριμώχνεστε όλοι και δεν προλαβαίνω να απαντάω.
Καλησπέρα σας, κυρία Γεωργαντά. Μπορώ να ρωτήσω κάτι?
Βεβαίως, κύριε Καραβακίδη.
Θα ήθελα να ρωτήσω αναφορικά από τις τελευταίες επισημάνσεις. Η μεταβίβαση δεν αλληλοδιαπλέκεται με την πραγματική σχέση, γιατί ουσιαστικά είναι τόσο εγωσυντονική. Ευχαριστώ.
Ναι, απλά νομίζω ότι μιλάμε ουσιαστικά για το ίδιο φαινόμενο, αλλά με διαφορετικό τρόπο. Δηλαδή ότι στην ουσία δεν είναι απλά ότι μεταφέρω κάτι από το παρελθόν στο παρόν, απλά είμαι στο παρόν με έναν συγκεκριμένο τρόπο με τον άλλον, ο οποίος είναι το αποτέλεσμα όλου αυτού του ταξιδιού και όλων αυτών των σχέσεων των προηγούμενων. Με την έννοια αυτό που έλεγε το Winnicott, του going on being, είμαστε ένα on που συνεχίζει και υπάρχει μέσα στον χρόνο και είμαστε στο τώρα με τον άλλον, συνδεδεμένοι με αυτόν τον τρόπο που συνδεόμαστε με όλες μας τις σχέσεις, όχι μονάχα με το θεραπευτή. Ουσιαστικά δηλαδή θα μπορούσαμε να πούμε ότι σε όλες μας τις σχέσεις κάνουμε μεταβίβαση, όχι μόνο στην ψυχαναλυτική σχέση. Είναι μια μεταβίβαση. Αλλά δεν είναι ακριβώς μεταβίβαση, είναι ότι αυτό είμαστε. Και αυτόν τον τρόπο έχουμε μάθει να συνδεόμαστε. Οπότε δεν είναι κάτι που απλά μεταφέρουμε στον θεραπευτή ως προβολή από το παρελθόν. Αλλά είναι ο τρόπος με τον οποίο είμαστε στο τώρα μαζί του και με τους υπόλοιπους.
Ευγενία, μπορώ να... Η Χλόη είμαι.
Γεια σου, Χλόη.
Μπορώ να πω κάτι πάνω σε αυτό?
Ναι, βεβαίως.
Δεν ακούγομαι καλά. Ο ρόλο Μέη διαφορίζει τη μεταβίβαση από την επικοινωνία, ως προς το ότι η μεταβίβαση έχει πάντα ένα σκέλος ασύνειδο. Ενώ στην υπαρξιακή ανάλυση η έμφαση είναι στη συνείδηση. Επομένως, η μεταβίβαση συνεπάγεται πρώτον ένα ασύνειδο πλαίσιο και δεύτερον συνεπάγεται οπωσδήποτε μια αντιμεταβίβαση. Δηλαδή πρέπει να λειτουργήσει το ασυνείδο. Ένα χαρακτηριστικό παράδειγμα. Μπορεί ο θεραπευτής, ο αναλυόμενος να βλέπει τον θεραπευτή σαν τον πατέρα του ή τη μητέρα του. Ή και το αντίστροφο, ο θεραπευτής να μεταφέρει στον αναλυτή, ο αναλυόμενος, να μεταφέρει τα αισθήματα αυτά. Αυτό το σύμπλοκο, θα ήθελα να ακούσω και τη γνώμη σου, δεν είναι επιθυμητό στην υπαρξιακή ανάλυση. Το ασύνειδο, όσο το δυνατόν περισσότερο, διοχετεύεται στη συνείδηση. Στην παρούσα σχέση, στο βίωμα. Δηλαδή, αν μου λέγανε, επειδή έχω κάνει και τις δύο εκπαιδεύσεις, αν χωρίζει κάτω τις δύο αυτές εκπαιδεύσεις, είναι αυτή η σχέση με το ασύνειδο. Το μαύρο κουτί που έλεγε ο Χάιντεγκερ.
Ναι. Δεν είμαι σίγουρη ότι κατάλαβα την ερώτηση. Μάλλον τοποθέτηση.
Όχι, δεν ήταν ερώτηση. Ήταν απάντηση στον συνάδελφο. Για τη μεταβίβαση, τη σχέση μεταβίβασης. Η μεταβίβαση δεν είναι εγωκεντρική, δεν είναι στο εγώ, είναι στο ασύνειδο.
Οκ. Ωραία, ευχαριστούμε. Κάποια άλλη ερώτηση? Τώρα δεν σας βλέπω, δεν έχετε ανοίξει τις κάμερές σας και βλέπω μαύρα κουτάκια. Υπάρχει κάποια άλλη ερώτηση? Τα είπα τόσο κατανοητά, μπράβο. Ή ήταν πολλές πληροφορίες και δεν μπορείτε να τις διαχωρίσετε?
Λίγο και από τα δύο.
Λίγο και από τα δύο.
Θα μπορέσουμε να την έχουμε, την παρουσίασή σου?
Ναι, βεβαίως.
Ωραία.
Ναι. Οπότε, ουσιαστικά εγώ αυτό που ήθελα να μείνετε πιο πολύ είναι ότι υπάρχουν 4 κύριες προσεγγίσεις μέσα στο ολόκληρο το υπαρξιακό, την υπαρξιακή ομπρέλα. Ότι η υπαρξιακή προσέγγιση δεν είναι μια ενιαία προσέγγιση. Γιατί δεν έχει και έναν συγκεκριμένο προπάτορα. Και αυτό είναι αυτό που επίσης τη διαφοροποιεί από πολλές άλλες προσεγγίσεις. Δεν είναι μια κεντρική, προσωποποιημένη θεωρία. Είναι μια θεωρία που συνδέεται με τη φιλοσοφία και όχι με τον άνθρωπο, με έναν συγκεκριμένο άνθρωπο. Και ουσιαστικά αυτό το οποίο είναι το ζητούμενο είναι το να μπορέσουμε όλοι, τέλος πάντων αυτοί που εκπαιδεύονται για να γίνουν θεραπευτές, να μπορέσουν να συνθέσουν ένα ουσιαστικά δικό τους μοντέλο. Το πώς είναι αυτοί, πώς είναι ο καθένας μας. Διότι ένα σημαντικό κομμάτι της υπαρξιακής ψυχοθεραπείας έχει να κάνει με αυτή την αυθεντική στάση. Να μπορούμε να είμαστε εαυτός μας και να έχουμε μια αληθινή, μια πραγματική συνάντηση με τον άλλον. Όπου είναι μια συνάντηση δύο προσώπων. Και επομένως χρειάζεται να μπορούμε ακριβώς να έχουμε και επίγνωση του τι κουβαλάμε εμείς και τι φέρνουμε. Δηλαδή θα μπορούσαμε πάλι να πούμε την αντιμεταβίβαση, δηλαδή τι είναι αυτό που εμείς κουβαλάμε από το παρελθόν και το φέρνουμε μέσα στις σχέσεις μας και το πώς αυτό επηρεάζει την συναλλαγή με τον άλλον. Επίσης, για μένα είναι μια μεγάλη διαφορά σε σχέση με την, όπως εγώ το αντιλαμβάνομαι, έτσι. Πρακτικά, μια σημαντική διαφορά σε σχέση με τη μεταβίβαση έχει να κάνει με το γεγονός ότι ο θεραπευτής, νομίζω, θα μου επιτρέψετε να πω, κάπως μπορεί να κρυφτεί πίσω από το θέμα της μεταβίβασης. Ότι, δηλαδή, αν κάποιος θεραπευόμενος είναι θυμωμένος μαζί του, αυτό είναι μια μεταβίβαση του θεραπευόμενου. Ενώ θα μπορούσαμε να πούμε ότι μπορεί να έχει όντως ένα μερίδιο ευθύνης και ο θεραπευτής. Και ο θεραπευτής καλείται να δει το τι είναι πραγματικό μέσα στη σχέση και το τι είναι αυτό που πραγματικά συμβαίνει μέσα στη σχέση, που μπορεί όντως να έχει θυμώσει τον άλλον και να μην είναι ένας αποθυμένος θυμός απέναντι στον πατέρα του και τώρα τον βγάζει το πρόσωπο του θεραπευτή. Οπότε, για μένα έχει μεγάλη αξία σε σχέση με την ειλικρίνεια και την αυθεντικότητα και τη γνησιότητα και την δυνατότητά μας να είμαστε πραγματικά πρόσωπα και εμείς μέσα στη σχέση. Το κομμάτι βέβαια της αυτοαποκάλυψης είναι ένα τεράστιο θέμα, το οποίο θα μπορούσαμε επίσης να έχουμε ένα ολόκληρο σεμινάριο γι' αυτό, σε σχέση με το πώς απαντάμε και πόσο ειλικρινά στεκόμαστε απέναντι στον άλλον. Ο Erik Craig διαχωρίζει δύο είδη αυτοαποκάλυψης. Μια αυτοαποκάλυψη που έχει να κάνει με προσωπικά μας δεδομένα, στα οποία χρειάζεται να είμαστε πολύ φιδωλοί και προσεκτικοί στο αν και πότε και γιατί θα μοιραστούμε κάτι που είναι προσωπικό μας με τον θεραπευόμενο. Αλλά υπάρχει και το κομμάτι της αυτοαποκάλυψης που έχει να κάνει με τη σχέση μας με τον θεραπευόμενο, με το πώς εμείς βιώνουμε τον άλλον, με το τι συμβαίνει με εμάς μέσα στη θεραπευτική ώρα. Και εκεί δεν χρειάζεται να είμαστε τόσο φιδωλοί, χρειάζεται βέβαια να είμαστε πάρα πολύ προσεκτικοί στο τι θα πούμε και το πώς θα το πούμε. Πώς θα πούμε αν ένας άνθρωπος μας κάνει να νιώθουμε βαρετά, για παράδειγμα, ή μας εξοργίζει για κάποιο λόγο. Και σαφώς θα πρέπει να είναι κάτι το οποίο θα το έχουμε επεξεργαστεί, θα το έχουμε δει και στην εποπτεία μας, αλλά μπορεί να είναι ένα πάρα πολύ χρήσιμο feedback για τον άλλον, το πώς με κάνει ο άλλος να νιώθω. Και νομίζω ότι η έννοια της παρουσίας φέρνει και αυτό το κομμάτι, ότι είμαστε παρόντες με την έννοια του ότι είμαστε σε συνεχή επαφή και επεξεργασία και εμείς με το σώμα μας και με αυτά τα οποία βιώνουμε. Και έχουμε τη δυνατότητα ακριβώς να αντιληφθούμε τι από αυτά μπορεί να προέρχεται από κάτι που είναι καθαρά δικό μας και τι από αυτό μπορεί να έχει σχέση με αυτό που φέρνει ο θεραπευόμενος μέσα στη σχέση. Και πόσο πολύ αυτό μπορεί να είναι βοηθητικό στο να μπορέσουμε να το καθρεφτίσουμε και να μπορέσει να το δει.
Ευγενία, έχει έρθει ο Έρικ. Πρέπει να τον καλωσορίσουμε. Βλέπω ότι είναι...
Δεν τον έχω δει και γι' αυτό συνεχίζω να μιλάω.
Ναι, έχει φτάσει ο Έρικ. Where are you, Eric? We are welcoming you. Say hi. We see you are in the list, but you're not... Where are you? We welcome you.
I'm here, λέει, αλλά πόντος.
We cannot hear you. We cannot see you, we cannot hear you.
No, we can see him. I can see
Ναι, μπορούμε να τον
You
δούμε.
can
We can
see
see
him.
him.
Okay. So now the next step is that we can hear. There you are. Hi. No, we cannot hear you. You want to go out and get in again, probably?
Ωραία, αυτά από μένα λοιπόν.
Ευχαριστούμε, Ευγενία.
Ευχαριστούμε πολύ, Ευγενία. Τώρα να δούμε, ελπίζω να μην έχουμε κάποιο τεχνικό πρόβλημα.
Δεν έχει σημασία το έστειλες ξεχωριστά το link, λες.
Όχι, είναι το ίδιο link γιατί κατάφερε να μπει. Απλά πολλές φορές πρέπει να βγούμε και να ξαναμπούμε. Γιατί μπήκε. Μας έβλεπε, απλά δεν μας άκουγε. Εμείς δεν τον ακούγαμε. Είναι καθαρά τεχνικό. Μέχρι εκεί ξέρω, δεν ξέρω κάτι παραπάνω.
Επ' ευκαιρίας, να παρακαλέσω όλους να κλείσουν τα μικρόφωνά τους, γιατί ακούγεται λίγο ένας ήχος και φοβάμαι μήπως η μαγνητοφώνηση δεν είναι καλή. Μπορείτε να τσεκάρετε όλοι ότι τα μικρόφωνα σας είναι κλειστά. Να πω ποιους βλέπω με τα μικρόφωνα τους ανοιχτά για να το φροντίσουνε. Κατερίνα, είσαι okay? Επειδή είσαι... Ωραία. Χλώη, έχεις ανοιχτό το μικρόφωνο σου, άμα μπορείς να το κλείσεις. Ήρθε ο Έρικ, αλλά δεν τον βλέπω.
Κάτι... επειδή φαίνεται σαν να μην λειτουργεί τον speaker του κυρίου Craig, κάποιοι μαθητές μου που έχουν αυτό το πρόβλημα βάζουν τα ακουστικά, τα hands-free και μετά μπορούμε να τους ακούμε. Γιατί είναι άλλη υποδοχή. Μήπως δοκιμάσει να βάλει hands-free.
Okay.
Hi, Eric. Would you like maybe to wear some earpods or something, because we cannot hear you? Do you hear us? Raise your hand, or if yeah, you can hear us, but we cannot hear you. Do you want to send a message in the chat thing so we can listen to what you are saying, to read at least what you're saying? Maybe here our students are saying in your screen, can you see your, I mean, the microphone is not muted. Doesn't look like from here. It looks open, but welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome, Eric.
It's nice to see you.
Nice
Each one of you. I can see Evgenia, Anna, and you, Katerina. But if I put on the full screen, I see the Effie, Christina, and Kali. The full, as Zorba put it, the full catastrophe. But I can't get to the second page, apparently, because I see only 1, 2, 3, 4. I see 24 people. I don't see.
No, we are about 60 people.
Yeah,
we're
I see.
60 with you, all of us.
Right.
We're 60
I see.
people.
Okay, well, that's great. I see the bee tree and cut Thanasis in the bottom line. But I'll just do the speaker view and. Oh, my goodness. There we go.
Well, thank you for joining us. It
took a while.
It's a nice pleasure to have you. And we are all waiting to hear about design analysis.
Design analysis, wow. So I've written about 6 different talks. This is something from friendship that one learns about someone, like Evgenia, you have learned about me. I'm an OCPD, obsessive compulsive personality disorder. So I've written several, but I'm just going to throw them all out, and we'll just talk here. We'll encounter Dasein while we're encountering one another. So in talking about Dasein, I am not wedded to an idea of this is the right way to see the world. It's a way that's been useful to me. It came to me in a way by fate. And I now don't think of myself just as a Dasein analyst, but as a humanistic relational Dasein analyst. But when we're thinking about Dasein, there's really two questions that Dasein analysis is concerned about. One is, what is it to be human? What is the human being as a human being? What makes a human being and not any other kind of human being? So this is one of the major questions in talking about Dasein together. The other major question is, what is it to be you? What is it for you to be a human being? So with those two questions in mind, I'd like to review Dasein's analysis from three different points of view. One is theoretically, the second is therapeutically, and the third is in life. What can we learn by encountering Dasein's analysis, by thinking about Dasein's analysis, by wondering about Dasein's analysis? What can we learn about what it means to be human, what it means to be ourselves, what it means to be thinking about what it is to be human? That's the theory part. What it is to put that to good use. And that's the psychotherapy part. Of what use is this? Especially many people wonder, why bother with ontology? What is it, all this ontology? Why bother with this? And then the third thing is, what does it give us that might be useful for life? And obviously, I'm only speaking about my own perspective here. And I hope it encourages you to think about your perspectives, whether you have any interest in Dasein's analysis or not. Dasein's analysis is my world. It really, when I look at this video right here, and I'm seeing this reflection of my office, I see all these things that back here in this bookshelf right there is all humanistic psychology. And this is all Heidegger. And then down here it gets to Buber and Husserl and Merleau-Ponty. And then this is all the neo-Freudians, pretty much all the neo-Freudians and letters Freud wrote to his colleagues. And so this is, so I started really right here with humanistic psychology. And included in humanistic psychology were the neo-Freudians. And this is the Adler, Jung, Horney was especially important, and Otto Rank was perhaps the most important. And then we get over here to much more classical and ego psychoanalytic psychology. We've got people like Winnicott and object relations. And here is the more contemporary relational psychologists like Nancy McWilliams, Jay Greenberg, I'm forgetting the name of the man that founded relational psychoanalysis, but these are all much more contemporary relational. Now,
Stephen Mitchell. Stephen Mitchell.
Stephen Mitchell, you got it. Thank you. Oh, that's great. Yes, Stephen Mitchell. He's up here on the top. But look how it's come to sort of organize my life in a way, but not as an abstract system, as something that's living and meaningful. Some of the most important books in this area are the personal letters between Freud and Jung, and Freud and Rank, and Freud and Ferenczi. It's a living thing for me. I remember when my second major teacher, Paul Stern, died. He was one of his best friends was Charles MacArthur. He was a genius in testing. He was a former chief of psychological services at Harvard. A wonderful man, but he was Irish and had a problem with alcohol. And when he died, I took one of these books to his hospital just a few days before he died. I flew back from New Mexico to see him. And I read to him some of the letters, some of the exchanges between Ferenczi and Freud. And he and I became really quite good friends after Paul died. And he was a very sweet old man, even if he had those problems, and very smart. And but when I went to the hospital room, and people thought, what are you doing? I'm reading to him. I put my hands right up to his ear, and I was reading to him, and he wouldn't do anything. He wouldn't move or couldn't talk or anything. But whenever I read a passage that was a funny exchange between Freud and Ferenczi, whenever there was some comments between the two of them that were very comical, he would have this little smile go across his face and he'd make this little noise. Why am I saying that? Because it's a living experience. It's something that, as abstract and philosophical as it is, it's something that touches the heart. And one of my dreams about Dasein's analysis and encountering Dasein is that it becomes something that touches our hearts. It helps us to see a different way to be. I think there are lots of different ways to do that. I think Taoism has also been a very important, not so much Taoism, but Buddhism, Taoism, Eastern thought, and contemplative. I think the whole modern contemporary mindfulness movement is also a way that deepens and enriches our lives. It makes us more human. It's not just about what is it to be human, but it's about experiencing humanity to its fullest, to knowing the fullness of it, and also the tragedy. But tragedy is part of the fullness. It's part of the richness. Some years ago, I spent a summer building a trail to the top of a mesa behind the house where I lived at that time in New Mexico. And I spent the whole summer. It was the summer my uncle died, actually, who was kind of like a father figure toward me. And but it was that summer I built this trail, and I ended up getting, I found this place where the rocks jutted out over the edge of the mesa. And when I finished the trail, I wrote a little prayer, and it goes like this: O Spirit of beginning, of Alpha and Eros, of creation and health and love and life, thank you for this gift of being. And then the second part, O Spirit of ending, of Omega and Thanatos, of destruction, disease, hatred, and death, Thank you for making this gift so precious. So we're all, of course, I'm sure you know from Dasein's analysis that we're not dead. We're all on our way to being dead. And this is something that on being towards death is, many people have a hard time with that. I've had at least 3 patients who've come in just for that one issue. Eventually we've gone on to other kinds of things. But it's an extraordinary thing, this death. The omega and the thanatos, the destruction, disease, hatred, and death. These two are also a part of humanity, and they make the preciousness of our humanity even richer. And that's maybe hard to think these days, when in my country where we have really a narcissistic psychopath who's in charge of everything, and he has many followers, and it's very hard to maintain in this atmosphere a feeling of the richness of life. But what does this person represent? This person represents, and his followers, millions and millions of followers. He's not alone. He could not exist if there weren't the millions of other people who like to think that way. What is that way of thinking? But why is that so dangerous to us? It's dangerous to us because of so much that we love, so much that we hold dear. And this is a very short riff on how Dasein's analysis, if that would be a way that you would choose, or mindfulness, or Eastern philosophy, or whatever. Maybe it's Catholicism for you, or Christianity. But whatever it is, whatever it is, I hope it's something. For me, Dasein's analysis is in Eastern thought. I pull the two together, as Boss did. Hopefully it's something that makes you feel more, not just know what it is to be human, but to feel more of it, to live more of it, to be aware of more of it on a constant basis in each immediate moment as it's passing. So, Ri Dongshik, my Taoist man who invented Tao psychotherapy, somebody I worked with for 12 years. No, it's 10 years, actually. He always emphasized the importance of living ideas. He often would say, no theory, no concept. Over and over. And because for him, it was living ideas. If the thing didn't live in you, it wasn't worth having, in a way. In any case, I'll continue around the bookcase. There's the relational psychology. And then back in the corner, which you can't see, behind the jade plant, a little further on, are all the Eastern texts, encyclopedias, Buddhist, Taoist, tons of books on the Oxford pictures, the famous pictures of enlightenment from I think it was the 11th century in China. Anyway, so that's what I hope we're going to do here. I'm going to close up some of these screens that are creating brightness there. I hope that this conversation will be a living encounter with Dasein, not just an intellectual encounter with Dasein. Though I hope it has some intellectual substance as well. So Dasein's analysis, starting out just in general, one that has to, to really understand Dasein's analysis, one has to understand on the one side phenomenology and on the other side psychoanalysis. They don't seem very compatible systems. If phenomenology is about seeing and understanding what shows itself from itself to us, then how on earth can one be a psychoanalyst or think psychoanalytically when psychoanalysis is about the unconscious? And can we understand the unconscious, the so-called unconscious? By the way, Freud did not use that term, the unconscious, when he was thinking carefully. He didn't use that term. He used the unconscious, he used the word as an adjective. So it describes something that we are unconscious of. So it's an adjective, it's not a noun. And Freud even said at one point, I think this idea about a second consciousness below the first consciousness is ludicrous. And he refused to use anything that would imply that kind of meaning to the unconscious. So he did not use the word subconscious, which many people say subconscious, as one of the things that psychoanalysis is interested in. But if you listen to Freud, he did not do that. So the question, this is an interesting question. It's one of those things that, really most of life, most of our own world, most of the universe, most of our own biological being, our own central nervous system, we're not aware of. I mean, 99% of it we're not aware of, but it's still part of our experience. So this is what I think of as what Freud really referred to with the unconscious. So it's not a reified concept. And when you look at it that way, it's something that I'm either aware of or I'm not aware of. That's a phenomenological statement. So one can approach even the unconscious phenomenologically. So to understand Dasein's analysis, one needs to know about phenomenology. One needs to practice phenomenology. And according to Voss, one needs to practice psychoanalysis. And so that means basically philosophy on the one side and psychology and psychotherapy on the other side. So it really combines these two fields. And Leonard Voss was really one of the very few psychoanalysts, he was a classical psychoanalyst, who worked with and studied and tried to integrate a professional philosopher. So it's a professional medical doctor and a professional philosopher who worked together for some years. I don't think they had a very happy ending, but that's another story. And it's a fairly widely kept secret, I think. But what I'd like to do then, now, just with that idea of this kind of extraordinary union of a science and a philosophy, to look at three things. And I'll talk a little bit about each one, and then I'd like for you to have questions, and or us to have a conversation, or you to make comments. So I'll see if I can get a sense of when we should stop each of these things. So roughly. So, and the three things I want to explore a little bit and share with you a little bit are the practice, and the life. Those three areas. Now, before I go on, do you have any questions or comments? Okay, I'll go on. So the theory, there are three things about the theory. One is, we mentioned already, phenomenology, and it's a phenomenological theory, that it's also a hermeneutic theory, and it is ontological. So it combines phenomenology with hermeneutics with ontology. And I'll say very little bit about, I'm sure you've all studied a lot of philosophy or heard about a lot of philosophy at Gignesday. So phenomenology is an approach to science and philosophy and practice that seeks to let things appear and show themselves and be known and understood and related to just exactly as they show themselves to us. As Husserl said, the first, well, he was the second phenomenologist. Brentano was the first. As Husserl was famous for claiming, to the things themselves, return to the things themselves. And we have such a tendency as human beings and as psychologists and as therapists to start looking behind the things themselves, to look for causes, to look for explanations, to look for categories that one can put this kind of thing into, instead of just staying with the very thing itself. And that's what phenomenology is. So if I'm meeting you on the street, I don't want to know you because you're Greek. And so, oh, this is a Greek person. I'm delighted to meet Greeks. I remember when I first met Evgenia and all of those of you who were there in China some years ago now. I think it was 8 years ago. I'm very happy to meet Greeks. My first teacher was Clark Mistakis and was Greek, and I have, my best friend today is a Greek who lives in Switzerland. And I love the Greek spirit, the Greek life, the Greek country, just the way of being. But that's not what I see when I meet somebody who's from Greece. Even though that was my initial excitement. Existentialists in Greece? Are you kidding? I had no idea. But then to meet a person, I wouldn't want it, you're being Greek or a man or a woman or the way you dress or what I've heard about you, or even particularly what you've told me about yourself to be what determines how I know you, how I understand you, how I experience you, especially how I experience you. As a phenomenologist, we want one another to show ourselves just as we are, to be known as we are, whatever that might mean for each of us. So that's phenomenology, and that's also what happens when somebody comes in for the first time. I loved what Carl Jung said about dreams. Whenever somebody gives them a dream, and I very much agree with him, he said, it just basically, sort of mentally gets down on his knees and says, I don't know what the hell this is about. I don't know anything about this. I think he probably said that more when he was younger than when he was older. Unfortunately, I think Freud did the same thing. They were much more phenomenological in their youth than they were in their older years. But it's the same thing when somebody comes into for the first time into a session. And actually, even to some extent, every session after that. I don't know what's going to happen right now. I might like this person very much. I might find them very challenging. I might be very concerned about them when they come in, but each session is, I don't know what's going to happen here. And I'm here to learn. I'm here to understand. I'm here to serve. I'm here to pay attention. I'm here to be present. Those kinds of things. I don't have thoughts going on. So that's what it is to be a phenomenologist in psychotherapy. And it's the same thing when you go for a walk. A phenomenological attitude is a lovely experience in nature. So that, I mean, it's nice if you know the names of all the flowers and trees and whatnot. But that tree is not just an oak. It's an oak or an olive tree like no other olive tree. It exists once and once only, as you and I do, by the way, that we are a one-time experiment on the part of nature. And we are a one-time experiment on the part of, to use a Heideggerian term, of being. So that's just a short statement about phenomenology. Now, the other thing that Heidegger added to Husserl's phenomenology was hermeneutics. And there's actually hermeneutics long preceded phenomenology. It goes back to the Greeks and was originally used for studying what was the true meaning of the scriptures. So it was a much more theological discipline. And then it became something that the law took up. What does the law really mean? And then philology, the study of literature and human writing. And so now it's a very common approach in many of the human science disciplines. What is hermeneutics? It is basically what we are, for one thing. We are creatures who are, this is one of the human ontologicals, we'll come back to it, but we're creatures who understand being. We are the creatures who have the capacity to understand being, not only to perceive and to react to it, but we are beings whose it's in our very nature to try to understand our world, because our world matters to us. I'm getting a little into the ontological side, but in everyday language. So for Heidegger, hermeneutics wasn't so much a science as it was for Schleiermacher. It was our very way of being. And so you could define then hermeneutics as the understanding of being. Hermeneutics is the understanding of being, not just the describing of being, which phenomenology tends to focus on, descriptive or pure phenomenology, but it's the understanding of being. It's the science and art of understanding being. That's hermeneutics. Now, often the word interpreting is included in that. And both Boss and Ri Dong-shik, the Taoists, really didn't like the idea of interpreting. They didn't like the idea of taking a phenomenon, which happens to be my coffee cup in this case, of taking a phenomenon and turning it into some kind of abstraction, which would be a classical understanding or an everyday understanding of what interpretation means. But if you see it as the science and art of understanding a being. For example, I'm sitting in a chair right now. Whoops, I'm getting into ontology. I'm going to let that go for now. So the second thing was hermeneutics. Let's just stop. Hermeneutics helps us to be ontologists. So that's hermeneutics. It's the science and art of understanding beings. So what you practice that whenever you meet a patient, whenever you meet a friend. You're constantly practicing that science and art, not as an abstract discipline, but as a human practice, And it's just so automatic for all of us. So the third thing then, so there's phenomenology, there's hermeneutics, and then there's ontology. So ontology is the study of being. And classically it was what makes beings the kinds of beings they are and not some other kind of being. So what makes trees trees and not fences? What makes cats cats and not dogs? What makes human beings and not chimpanzees or rocks or flowers? What is it that makes a human being as a human being? What constitutes human nature? So this was Heidegger's question on his way to trying to understand being, because his real question was the word is. This thing of bodhisattva is. It is there. That is a thing of bodhisattva. These are roses. This is a rose. This is a book. This book right here. I am a human being. This is a cup. I am sitting in a chair. What makes a chair a chair? So that's the question of ontology. What makes a chair and not a bed or a couch or a walker or a stair climber? So let's just do a little example of that. This is a little example of ontology, hermeneutic ontology. So it's a chair is something that's made by human beings for human beings in order that they can both rest and be attentive. It's different from a bed where you can rest, but you're not quite as attentive. So, and it's different from a standing desk where you can be attentive, or a lectern where you can be attentive, but you're not able to rest. You've got to maintain a certain posture. But so what's the criteria there? What is it? And I might be wrong about this, by the way. This is my attempt to give a hermeneutic understanding of the ontology of chairness. Well, I just lost the question that I was asking. So, okay, I got it. So what is the criteria? What is the criteria for making such a statement? A chair is something that's made by human beings for human beings so that they can both be restful and alert and present. Whatever statement you make about any kind of being that describes what all chairs are, in every single moment of their being a chair, as long as they exist, that's what a chair is. A chair is no longer a chair when it breaks. it no longer serves that purpose. It was a chair. It's no longer a chair because it doesn't satisfy the criteria that makes chairs chairs. That is, that they are made by human beings for human beings in order that they can both rest and be alert. So that was Heidegger's question about human beings. What is it that makes a human being? And the criteria for an ontological characteristic of a human being is that it has to be true of every human being in every moment of every human being's existence. It has to be true of every human being in every moment, so that there's not many things you can say about that. So these are what are called the ontological characteristics of a human being. These are the existential characteristics of being a human being. They are the existentials, in short. To be short, there was, and Heidegger actually called existentials versus existentials, which were the ontic. This human being, this book, this flower, this little statue. Those are the ontic things. So I'm then gonna go on to some three distinctions here about being. So we're still on the ontological understanding of human beings. There are three kinds of levels or aspects of being an ontologist, as a psychologist, as a Daseinsanalyst. One is in the ontic. The ontic is that book, this desk, those flowers, that door, that thermometer, that other statue of Buddha up there, this jade tree, these bookshelves. These are all ontically experienced. They're in the ontic world. They are in our everyday world. They show up, they exist once and once only. For whatever their lifetime is, as long as they are what they are, and they are the only one. I am the only Erik, you are the only Evgenia or Anna or Thanasis. It's not going to happen again. So these are all particular beings. When someone dies in our life, someone that we know, they can't be replaced. They can't be replaced with another love. They can't be replaced with a pet. They can't be replaced with having another baby. That's not possible. This, in the world of ontic existence, it's a once and once only world. And we know that in some way. And that's part of our grief. Of course, we try to avoid it with the inauthentic project. If a relationship breaks up, can I find some love someplace else? That's not a bad question. It's a very good question, of course. Can I? Because we all need attachment. We all need people that we love and that love us and that we have some attachment to. Sorry, I'm having some pop-ups here I got to get rid of. And so it's a good question, where will I find love? Well, remember, for one thing, your grief is your love. Your loss is your love. It points to the love. You wouldn't be feeling this grief if it weren't for your love. And grief is really the only way to love what has passed. So I'm noticing we're using quite a bit of time on the theoretical part, and I'd like to, and let me just mention a few of the ontologicals that I think are important then. So these are all characteristics of the human being. There's only about 25 at the most things that Heidegger could say about that were true for every single human being in every moment of a human being's existence. But the most important ones were, one is that we exist as a realm of world openness, not as someone who has consciousness, whatever that is, but a realm of world openness. We are that kind of being that is able to perceive, to let other beings be. By the way, this is also called a Lichtung, a lightedness. And we are all building up together a light of the world. Each one of you here, each one of us here has illuminated a world, many worlds. And all of us together are building up a light, the light of the world together. We're building up an understanding, an allowing of being to show itself to us. So that we're all a realm of world openness, so we have the capacity to perceive, to understand, and to reply. All three of those three things. That's what that realm of world openness is. So that's a really important one. For Heidegger, the most important ontological, the most important thing he could say about human beings that were true for all human beings, these are universals, they're invariables, was that human beings are those kind of beings that can understand being. And for him, this was particularly important. I don't want to get into the philosophical aspect of it, but because he was interested in being, period. Why are there beings at all, and why not rather nothing? That was his big question. And the reason he wanted to understand human beings, because human beings were the only ones that possessed this capacity for understanding being. So he wanted to understand the telescope, so to speak, so he could really study the stars more effectively. So this understanding of being for him was the number one thing. The second thing is implied in the name Dasein, D-A-S-E-I-N, their being. Da also means here or their being. That we are being in the world. We are worlded. We exist as a world. You are totally constituting my existence right now. You, all of you, are totally constituting my existence right now. And I'm constituting yours to some degree, whether you're out there sleeping or that's also a way of constituting it, or interested or whatever you're feeling. I'm also constituting your existence, but also constituting your existence is your immediate world. You're looking at your computer, I'm looking at mine. I've got a picture of Boss. I've got a picture that Peter Gay, Rubens, Peter Gay had here, and then a signed photograph of Freud. So these constitute my world, not just you, but you're the focal part of my, constituting my existence right now. You all are building up your own worlds, and you all have those worlds. So we are our worlds. We are our worlds. We are our relationships. Our relationships are what constitute our existence. Not to mention our space and our time. These all also, but so that's a third, third ontological. So there's a realm of world openness, or Lichtung, the lightedness of being human. Understanding of being, we are beings who understand being. We are being in the world with their being. We are worlded. We are not encapsulated in our skins or in our brains. We are a world. That's what makes human beings human, because they are this lightedness. Then there's being with others. Mitsein is the German term. is that we're always with others, even when we're away from others. The hermit is with others in the way of avoiding others, but he's always with them in the way of avoiding them. It's impossible to be human without being with others, other human beings. That's Mitsein. Another is, and this is where this one is particularly challenging in psychotherapy, and that is what's called finitude, that we're all limited. We're not gods, we're limited. And of course, the most crucial part of that limitedness is what's called being toward death, which is another ontological. Now, Irv Yalom says there are these four basic, I forget what he calls them, but they're not ontologicals. He calls them death, meaningless, isolation, and freedom are the four. Only freedom is a true ontological. Death is not an ontological. Being toward death is an ontological. Because if death was an ontological, we'd all be dead right now. But we are all being toward death. So this is obviously a critical one. This is what has brought in, I've seen so many people just for this reason, because they can't tolerate the idea of being gone. And we can say a lot more about that. We can say a lot more about any of these things. But being finite and being toward death is really, these are two really critical ones that we have a hard time with. Right now, with the coronavirus, and I'm so pleased that you all are not in a country where you've got, I'm sorry, but a moron running the country. And I won't say anything about who's following the moron, but because it's really frightening. There's no sense of having any control and having any certainty at all in this time, especially in this country. And I don't know how that is for you, and I don't know how, if you're doing, and I'm sure most of you are doing therapy of some kind, how much this finitude, the lack of certainty, the lack of knowing, the lack of control, our finitude, how much this is troubling your clients right now. It's certainly troubling people that I see to varying degrees. Some people are feeling quite safe, but somewhat contained. Other people are just feeling really very unsafe. So those are just some of the ontologicals. And I'll just repeat these few. There's about 25 altogether, but realm of world openness, that we are a light, and we're all building up the light of the world. You have your world, I have my world. When we get together, we share parts of that. We're all building up the light of the world, which means we all shine light on. We make room for being and beings to be what they are. That's what that realm of world openness is, or the Lichtung. Second is understanding of being. Third is being in the world, being there, not being in, but being there. We are worlded beings. We're not beings in a box, wrapped up in an epidermis. Fourth, we're being with others. We're always with others, as you and I are being together right now. The German term that Daeinanalysis use for psychotherapy is Miteinandersein. Miteinandersein. Being with one another. Being with one another. Not being here and you being there. Not sitting down with a person across from me, as Rollo May often says. I sit down with the person across from me. No, a person's not across from you. They are your existence in that moment. So we are worlded, and we are with others, being with one another. We are finite. We don't know most of what is actually, and we don't have control of everything in our lives. There are contingencies that intrude on all of us that we didn't ask for. By the way, that's another ontological, is thrownness. We were just thrown into the world. We didn't choose our parents. We didn't choose our country. We didn't choose our time. And then there's being towards death. So I'm going to pause. That's that. I finished with the theoretical. It took much longer for the theoretical than I was hoping, but there we are. So I'd like to have some questions, and if anyone's open to that. If anyone's ontically open. We all exist as an open realm of, right? The question is, ontically, if we are all existentially open, that's an ontology. The ontic is, then we have to decide if we're going to be open to any particular thing. In this case, are you open to asking a question? You don't have to be, by the way. I'm not pressuring you. I'm just using this as another example.
Evgenia, μπορώ να κάνω εγώ μια ερώτηση?
Ευγενία.
Μπορώ να κάνω την πρώτη ερώτηση?
Δεν ακούγεσαι καλά μόνο, Χλόη. Ο ήχος σου δεν είναι καλό.
Τώρα ακούγομαι.
Για προσπάθησε.
Τώρα ακούγομαι.
Ναι.
Έχω πολλή αντίχηση. Δεν ξέρω τι να κάνω για να το...
Ναι, έχει αντίχηση.
Δεν ξέρω.
Αλλά τώρα είναι καλύτερο. Έχεις δύο παράθυρα ανοιχτά, γι' αυτό ίσως.
Μόνο τους ανοίγουν και κλείνουν. Wow. Well, your exquisite lecture reminded me the final chapter of Merleau-Ponty's Phenomenology de la Perception. My name, by the way, is Chloe Collieri, and I am a psychoanalyst, but very friendly to existential analysis. So,
welcome.
So,
it's Claude. Did you say it was Claude?
Chloe, like the Greek goddess of the grass, Chloe. C-H-L-O-E. Chloe, yes.
Chloe. Oh, wow.
I'm French educated, and in French it's Chloe. So I'm
okay. Okay, Chloe. Thank you.
After all the time, I have the opportunity to meet you, Mr. Craig. What can I say? Your books, everything. So I wanted to say that your exquisite lecture reminds me the final chapter of Merleau-Ponty Phenomenologie de la Perception, liberty, la liberté. So my question is, where is liberty? From one side, in phenomenology, where is a predominance of the intellect over the body, and from the other side, where is freedom in psychoanalysis, where the id, and not the unconscious, as you correctly said, where the id is the boss over the ego and not the conscience. So where is the liberty? The only margin of liberty is between being towards death from the one side, that coincides with what contains the pleasure principle. What is over the pleasure principle, from the other hand, is the death drive. So, is liberty and resoluteness in this little margin of towards death, of knowing that we die? And what is the spirit? What moves things? Is pleasure from one side? Is meeting being the design, what are the margins, what are the limits of our freedom? Thank you very much.
Well, that's quite a question. By the way, phenomenology and perception is right there. So,
thank you very much for that.
Appreciate your reminder that it's right behind me.
And here is the Greek, Mr. Craig, here is the Greek edition.
Okay, great. Yeah, where is liberty? Liberty is not in what's thrown at us, whether it's from the body or from the world or from relationships. That's not where our liberty is. Freud, by the way, I'm picking up on this categories of Freud from civilization and discontents. What causes human beings suffering? Why do human beings suffer? Which is his first question in this, or it's his main question in Civilization and Discontents. We suffer because of nature, natural catastrophes. We suffer from disease, from our own bodies, and we suffer from relationships, human relationships. And Freud was unequivocal whenever he talked about this. What causes us the most suffering? Our human relationships. It's what we do with one another that causes us the greatest suffering. And then, of course, he goes on with his exquisite essay about what is it about humans being with one another that causes so much suffering. Where is our freedom in this? You reminded me when you were speaking about this and the being towards death. Being towards death it's like losing a lover. Losing a lover points to love. The fact that you had love in your life, that it meant so much to you, that it's just painful to wake up in the morning and realize that person is gone. Being towards death is the same thing. What people don't pay much attention to in Heidegger is that he also spoke, unfortunately, very little about being from birth, being towards birth, actually, from this present moment. We are both being towards death and being towards birth. But birth is the miracle. You have a better chance, you, Chloe, have a better chance of winning every single lottery on this planet, every single day of your life. You have millions more chance of that than you do of being born at all. That's the miracle. So it's like when we are in grief, we're only in grief because we've loved. We die only because we were born, only because we're here. And so what I'm responding to here is, where is the freedom? The freedom is in our small reply, in our very humble reply to the contingencies of life that far surpass our capacity. But we do have the capacities to reply. There's where our freedom lies.
Thank you, Erik.
I'm not addressing all the theoretical aspects of that you're talking about, of the different. I'm just speaking of the living response to your question, not so much the theoretical response. But that's a great question. Thank you for that. And it's nice to meet you. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Erik. I also wanted to ask you something. When you're talking about finitude, are you also including the concept of Throneness? Because you put a lot of things that I always thought as our Throneness.
Yeah, I mentioned Throneness at the very end, but what was your first, when I talked about something and then?
Finitude.
Finitude, yeah. Well, Throneness is another aspect to that.
Okay.
Throneness is the fact that we are thrown in existence, and we are thrown a world. we come into the world, and immediately we're thrown everything that comes with that world. It's very, of course, that world gets larger the longer we live, but larger and larger. The longer we live, the more we have to lose, really. Yeah, thrownness and finitude are finitude is, by the way, these existentials are equiprimordial. They're not separate. They all come together in one human being. The more I've studied Heidegger and Eastern philosophy, the more deeply aware of the unitiveness, the unitariness of existence and the world. That we're all one. We are oneing. Right? Every one of us here on this Zoom is oneing. N-E-I-N-G. We are all one. Oops, there's some music. Okay, are we gonna one to the beat? So, Evgenia, I'm not sure, have I answered your question? Because throne is, throne and facticity are often put together. Facticity is the fact, just the fact that we are. That we are. Not how we are, not who we are, but that we are. Not why we are even, certainly not why, but just that we are. That's facticity. Does that help? Evgenia?
Yes.
Is that am I answering?
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Can I say something? Chloe, can you close?
Yes.
It makes a lot of noise.
Τι να έχω?
Yeah. Is that Chloe's thing? He needs to turn off his microphone.
Yes.
Έκλεισε τώρα.
Όχι, δεν έχει κλείσει, Chloe μου.
Τώρα.
Όχι. Δεν δείχνει να είναι κλειστό.
Υπάρχουν δύο users, Chloe. Ίσως εκεί και τα δύο πρέπει να κλείσουν.
I'm gonna depart for about a minute and a half. I'll be right back. This is part of my thrownness.
Okay.
Very sorry about that, but
Ευγενία, έκλεισε.
Κατερίνα, ίσως μπορείς να τη βοηθήσεις εσύ να κλείσει το μικρόφωνο.
Θα προσπαθήσω. Όχι, για κάποιο λόγο δεν μπορώ να το κάνω εγώ. Πρέπει η Chloe να το κάνει από το δικό της.
Δοκιμάζω όλες τις options και δεν ξέρω.
Chloe, κάτω αριστερά που λέει audio, αν το πατήσεις, θα μπορέσει να το κλείσεις.
Ναι, το unmute δηλαδή. Να.
Αλλά είσαι μέσα με δύο παράθυρα.
Όλα αυτά έχουν γίνει ερήμην μου. Λοιπόν, ένα λεπτό.
Έχει συνδεθεί από δύο...
Λοιπόν, ένα λεπτό. Συγγνώμη.
Και όποιος άλλος έχει κάποια ερώτηση, μπορεί να ρωτήσει.
Εγώ έχω μια ερώτηση, αν μπορώ. Έχω σηκώσει το χέρι μου, δεν ξέρω αν φαίνεται.
Δεν είχα το χέρι σου, αλλά είδα στο chat που το έγραψες.
Ναι. Έκανα και τα δύο, γιατί δεν ήξερα αν φαίνεται το χέρι όταν το σηκώνεις.
Χέρι δεν το είδα, αλλά το είδα.
Hello again.
Hello, this Yasmin?
Ναι.
Yasmin wants to ask a question.
Pardon?
Should I go ahead and ask my question?
Yes, please. I'm ready.
Yes, hello. Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you, except I don't...
Okay. Well, my question is about understanding being, and if you could speak a bit more about that.
That ontological?
Or is it actually understanding it?
Okay, great. That's a good question. So understanding being, it's called, the German word is Seinsverstandnis. Being, understanding. Verstandnis is understanding, Seins is being. So that ontological is called Seinsverstandnis in German. Understanding being doesn't mean that you understand it correctly. It means that we're always interpreting being. We're always, it's the wrong word, interpreting. We're always trying to understand things. Everything in our world. By the way, another ontological is care. Everything in our world matters to us. Matters in different ways. Sometimes things matter in the way of they don't matter very much, but that's still a way of mattering. So it's the same thing with understanding. I would say probably, in fact, misunderstanding is a more common way of understanding than truly understanding, than accurately understanding and deeply understanding. So most of our understanding is not, I mean, if you've had it, if you've ever done an analysis of a train, you really wonder, whoa, did that person hear what the other person was saying? It's amazing how remarkable our capacity for conversation is. The words actually are quite often misleading when you write them down. But for some reason, when we're talking with one another, maybe it's the fact that it's our understanding of one another is primarily right brain and not available to us. It's something of which we're not conscious. Most of our conversation is what's called proto-conversation from Trevarthen, Colwyn Trevarthen. It's a great word, and the American Ed Tronick has done some wonderful research with videos. But most of our conversation is proto-conversation. It's right brain to right brain, and it's happening much faster than our left brain and our cortex can comprehend. So, but in any case, to the question of understanding, I'm not quite sure where your question's coming from, but to put it most simply, the world matters to us, and we're always trying to understand it. Whether it's a traffic sign or the traffic itself, or what a friend is saying, or what a client is saying, or what's going on in our bodies, what's going on in the world politically. We're all trying to understand. And I think, personally, that we're usually, at the very least, understanding incompletely. And we're definitely always understanding incompletely, but quite often not correctly. So understanding is a very important thing. And that's something, of course, that we all do as therapists, is try to really get what the other person is saying. I don't know if that helps, Yasmin. Yasmin?
Thank you so much. My internet is playing up, so I didn't hear everything you said, but someone will help me with that. Someone will convey what you have said. But thank you very much.
Okay. Nice to see you again.
Lovely to see you too.
So, shall we go on to therapy at this point? Psychotherapy, wow. This is where I think Daseins has to some degree failed, and quite seriously. I think the relational analysts with Mitchell and Greenberg and Nancy McWilliams and Aaron are much more Daseins analytical in their approach to analytic psychotherapy than Daseins analysts, because they recognize the mutuality of human relationships and of therapeutic relationships. And they take responsibility for their own participation in this. This is very different from classical psychoanalysis. And which Boss, as much as he loved Freud and thought well of him, he still was stuck in classical analysis. He was trained at the Berlin Institute, where the analyst would, the psychoanalyst would come in, the patient would come in one door and lie down on the couch. The psychoanalyst would come in from a door behind the patient, so the patient couldn't see him, would sit in a chair behind the patient. At the end of the session, the analyst would get up and walk out, and then the patient would walk out. That's the kind of rigidity that pervaded, and they wouldn't even wear their wedding rings in case someone happened to glance at that. It's as if the wedding ring discloses something any more than having no wedding ring. And of course, even the fact that the analyst was totally secretive is totally disclosive. So Boss was really reacting to that, and I tried to get all the Daseins analysts to look at these books right here. This relational group of psychoanalysts. Bob Stollerow is a good friend of mine, and he and I've done a number of Daseins/intersubjective conversations at APA. But his way, there's two relational groups in psychoanalysis. There's the New York Mitchell Greenberg group of relational psychoanalysis, and then there's Bob Stollerow's intersubjective, Stollerow and Atwood and Donna Orange and so forth. But they all, each in their own way, with their different emphasis, really take the idea of the mutuality of the therapeutic relationship seriously. They're much more Mitsein, Miteinander. They're much more in that vein. And so I was always trying to get Boss to read this, and Kondraw especially. Kondraw and I became quite good friends. But Kondraw was Boss's main student, and he did a lot for Daseins analysis. But I tried to get them to read it, and they just would not read these things. And it was really where psychoanalysis is gone. Starting probably, after 60 or 70 years after the founding of psychoanalysis, Boss was still stuck in that old form. So for me, authentically Daseins analytic psychotherapy really holds to the combination of principles that there's two people here paying attention to the life of the one. We're both here working in the service on behalf of and for the benefit of the one. That's the essential structure of psychotherapy. Psychotherapists have two rights, according to Freud, and one of my lectures, by the way, for today was all the things I love that Freud said. But this is one of the psychotherapists have two rights. One of them is to get paid for their time. And that's it. They get paid for their time, not their caring, not their anything else. They're paid for their time. And why? Because a psychotherapist gives up that hour of their existence. That's a pretty precious gift. You only get that hour once. You never get it again. And you give that up to be of service to the other, to attend to the other, to be with, in, and for the other. So that's a huge thing. So you get paid. That's one right that you have. And the second right you have is to feel that you're doing what you want with your life, what you want. You're fulfilling your own sense of purpose in the world. Beyond that, there's no question. I get a lot more out of psychotherapy than any one of my patients. I don't think they'd say that, but I clearly do. But that's a benefit. I don't have a right to that. So, so the two premises then that I'm talking about in terms of relational analytic work, which Daseinsanalytic therapy is, relational analytic work. I'm going to say a word about analysis in a second. But it is mutual, fully mutual, and yet asymmetrical. It's both things. It's again one of these things that we have to hold in one. That I'm working with a patient now. I've been seeing. She's in her 80s. I've been seeing her for 30 years, and she's going back over the journals over the first years of our relationship, and she's reading from those journals. And we're watching the unfolding of the so-called misnomer. We could say that. We could say something about transference from a phenomenological, but she's going back over the sort of the initial, let's better terms, the development of her attachment to me and her understanding of my attachment to her. And it's just extraordinary work. It's extraordinary. What a rich opportunity. This is one of the issues that you see her struggling with very early in the relationship. Where, what does this mean? Is it mutual? Oh, well, I really love Eric, but he doesn't love me in the same way. He doesn't love. It's unrequited, and so we're just going over that whole thing. So it's a tension that we have to hold, that it is totally mutual. Everything that we say or do or come to believe is co-constructed between the client and yourself. Now, so that's one thing I want to say about that. The other things are, I could say something about a phenomenological reading of Transference. There's a wonderful little phrase here, section of Freud. Where this is just, it's an amazing paragraph. It's in his first article on transference, the dynamics of transference. He writes, it must be understood that each individual has acquired, and this is early in life, a specific method for his own conduct in his erotic life. That is, the preconditions for falling in love, which he lays down in the instincts he satisfied, or the desires he satisfied, and the aims he sets for himself. And these preconditions for loving, it established very early in life. I don't believe Freud was correct in saying, oh, that these are then transferred inappropriately onto somebody. No, this is an attachment style. These are the conditions for human attachment that we learn early in our lives, and we must learn early in our lives because we need other human beings. We cannot survive without other human beings. And love is certainly one of the greatest pleasures in life, and one of the most meaningful and satisfying ways of being. So we need that, but so right from the beginning, where our whole organism, our whole Dasein is finding out, is learning through their thrownness, by the way. This is also thrownness, because you're thrown parents. You didn't choose those parents. And they're going to relate to you in a way that no other parents maybe relate to you in a way they didn't relate to the other kids. But we're thrown that. And from that thrownness, as a child, we learn what is love and what is not love. So, quick example. Let's say you're a woman and you had a father who was very busy and was very rational and logical, and also had a big professional life, and maybe was alcoholic, and so you could really never count on him, and he certainly wasn't interested in your feelings at all. So what happens? Your body and your central nervous system, your limbic system, learns this is love. So you grow up, and what do you know? You either find people who are pretty much the duplicate of that, well, that's the typical case. Those are the conditions for love. You're looking to fulfill those conditions for love. You're looking for love, but you're not looking for those conditions, really. That's something that you're thrown, and those have been established bodily in you. So you meet somebody who's is a very successful guy, and maybe he likes to party a little bit, and he's a very intellectual guy, and he doesn't like to talk about your feelings. And you say, oh, how are you feeling about this? What did you mean when you said that? That sounded like you were a little annoyed or something. No, I wasn't. Or not even having time for you. It's not just interested in spending time with you the way you would like to have time with him. That's fulfilling those early conditions. So you've also got conditions for, and when you meet somebody like that, if you're from that kind of a thrownness, you meet somebody like that, you say, oh, this must be love. Your body says this must be love. Then you meet a guy who's really sweet and talks about his feelings and wants to know how you're feeling, and is kind of gentle, and he's got all the time in the world for you. He's maybe very successful at work, but and maybe even has a lot of money, but he's just soft, sweet, attentive, comfortable with his affect and his thinking and with conversation. And you meet somebody like that, and your body says, this can't be love. This can't be love. So these are the preconditions. So what does transference mean in that way? It doesn't mean, as a phenomenologist, it doesn't mean that we are transferring the feelings for our mother or our father onto some other person where they're not appropriate. I believe that that every transference is always a hook, as Jung had pointed out. There's always a coat hook to hang the experience, on. There's a coat hook that you provide as a therapist that allows that person to start to relate to you in the way that they used to relate, and the way that they have related their whole lives when they get in close relationships. So transference is a carrying over. That's what it means, literally, carrying over. Carrying over. Carrying over what? Carrying across time. That would be the phenomenological, from my point of view, of transference, the carrying across time of certain conditions for loving and being. So it's a characterological thing, not a pathological thing. It's not a distortion. It's not a, there's always something that you provide as a therapist that provides a legitimate basis for that person's activations of their own conditions for loving or feeling love or not feeling love. So that's another, that's a little example of a phenomenological analysis of one of Freud's therapeutic constructs. For me, the two things that are critical for as a practicing Daseins and these are part of the first article that I ever wrote, and I've gone back to that now, and I see I agree with almost everything I've said. And I live by that. And the two things are what I call sanctuary, and the second thing is presence. And these are very basic things. There's a lot of other things about psychotherapy that are, you know, really important. It's quite a science and art and practice. It's quite a way to be a therapist. And, you know, no 10-minute, no 10-month, no 10-year talk is ever going to exhaust what this life is like, really, when it really, what, you know, another thing that Freud said, you know, there are always in chess a few good moves, but there's many, many, many bad moves. And so how to be able to discern what might be the best possible move on this person's behalf is the challenge. But the two things are sanctuary and presence. Sanctuary is what I'm referring to as what Winnicott talked about as the basic conditions for a facilitating environment. An adaptive facilitating environment is what he spoke of, and I think of that as the sanctuary. It's the terms that you set with a patient, with an individual. By the way, I don't have any problem with the use of the word patient. It comes from apati, meaning to suffer. I'm a patient too. I don't think I'm, you know, I'm not a person without his own suffering and neurotic conflicts and whatnot. So it's not a matter of having authority or being better than the people that I work with at all. So, but when you say patient, people actually, most of the people that I work with, I don't use that term, but they use it. They use it and they like it. Because what it says to them is, I'm the person who's the center here. You've got to, and I don't hesitate to tell people I'm in therapy now, and I am. It's a second analysis I've had, and that's just an extraordinary experience, extraordinary. I just think it's not something we should ever feel we're beyond anymore. It's so rich. So the word patient is not something that I'm uncomfortable at all, but it says this, so the sanctuary or this adaptive environment that Winnicott spoke about is it's the terms for that. The term framework was first used by, that'd be another term for sanctuary, was first used by I think it was Margaret Little. And who was an artist, and she, yeah, I'm almost sure it was Margaret Little. It might have been Joanna Feld, but I think it's Margaret Little. She was talking about the framework, meaning in art, when you've got a work of art, it's set off in a frame. And that frame basically says to us, this is a reality that is different from this reality. It's still real. Even a painting is real. That's a real reality, just like our dreams are real. Our dreams are no less real than our waking life. But the painting sets off a reality for us to attend to enter, to dwell with, to understand, to be moved by, one way or another. It doesn't have to, there's no trying to tell you which way to think or feel or respond to it. But it sets off a reality. So the framework is that which protects the life of two human beings who are there with one another, fully with one another, for the benefit and growth and well-being of the one. And so whatever, that is just a crucial thing. Without that safety, there's two things the sanctuary provides, two things the framework provides, is both security and protection and freedom. Within those bounds, it offers complete freedom. So, well, not complete. I mean, as I've had to say to a couple people, well, if you break that statue, you're going to pay for it. You'll be responsible for anything you break. Nobody's ever broken anything. Well, they threatened. So it's not total freedom, but it's freedom of thought and freedom of feeling and freedom of imagination that the frame or the sanctuary protects. So that's the first thing. And that's the precondition, really, for the freedom and the growth and the work of the therapy. It's the precondition for it. Now, another thing that provides that is an aspect of presence. There's a special aspect of presence. So presence is, the word for therapy is therapein from Greek, as you know, and it originally from the those dream theaters or dream hospitals or clinics of Asclepius and Epidaurus, and it meant, therapein meant simply to attend, to be present with, in, and for the other. So, and so it's not just presence, but Bas and I we didn't have a conversation about this, but I always felt this was the difference. When I asked him about presence, he would just say, and when anybody, he even wrote about this a lot, about the most important thing is just to be present, just to be present, just mere presence. He even said after he met Heidegger, that psychoanalysis or Dasein's analysis he was on a holiday. Whew. And I've always thought, what, holiday? This is work. I don't mean it's arduous work. It's sometimes very challenging work, but it requires a lot to just be there with, in, and for the other entirely for a whole hour. Even when you're saying something about yourself, it's for the other. It's for that person's benefit. And but one of the aspects of this is attention, listening. Some of the things that are required for presence is listening, attention, understanding, a big part of that is correcting one's misunderstandings, repairing one's ruptures, and they're there all the time. I mean, there are little ruptures every session. There's those little ruptures that developmental psychologists have found between even the best mothers. They used to think that best mothers would have a match with their children 50% of the time, and a mismatch 50% of the time. Now the research, the really super research with these microsecond analyses of interactions between mothers and children, is the mismatches are 70% of the time. 70% of the time. But fortunately, it's this right brain to right brain communication. We make the corrections even before we know that we've made a mistake. I mean, none of this happens. So much of proto-conversation happens before language. So, but repairing the ruptures, repairing the misses, that's also part of this presence. I think compassion is a part of the presence. And the problem with compassion is overwhelm, is that we listen to some stories that sometimes they can bring you to the edge of vomiting to hear what people have gone through sometimes. And there's been probably, I don't know, half a dozen sessions in my experience where I had that kind of reaction, and where it just stayed with me all night. Just the level of trauma and suffering that was going on. And yet our job is not to be overwhelmed by our compassion. So compassion comes with the problem of overwhelm. And how do we not overwhelm? How do we not get overwhelmed? And that's where what I would call equanimity is crucial. Equanimity. So there's compassion, but there's equanimity. There's an even-mindedness, what Freud called evenly hovering attention. Now, Freud was not into emotional. He was hardly a sentimentalist at all. But he did understand that he needed to stay steady, but that was a part of the framework. It's a crucial part of the framework. No painting is going to be understood if you're holding it and moving it around and wiggling its surface. And, there's a real evenness, but I don't mean an evenness without emotion. Equanimity is that way of being in the world that allows for all moments, all emotions to show themselves as they are and to come into their fullness without getting overwhelmed. So Freud called that evenly hovering attention. One of the mindfulness teachers I was studying called equanimity, and I love this phrase, non-reactive spaciousness. Non-reactive spaciousness. So that's where I want to make the comparison between reaction and response. Reaction is our immediate reaction to things. Response is that we take something in, we let it be what it is in us fully, but we don't react to it. We hold it. This is Winnicott's wonderful phrase, the holding environment, which is also, it's another term for the sanctuary. That we hold all those emotions, let them come into their fullness, but hold them. Now, I understand that we're human beings, so that's not always easy. So, but that's the ideal. That's the idea. We try to get as close to that kind of equanimity in really intense, challenging situations as we can. But that's really the issue with compassion. And I love that phrase, non-reactive spaciousness. So, I left this question about presence. All of these things I've been talking about are a part of presence. And boy, I would think of this as one of these two things: sanctuary, the safety and security on one side, and then the presence on the within that frame. There's just so. Whatever technique or theory or whatever approach you use, whether you're cognitive, or analytic, or whatever approach, or logotherapist, or it doesn't make any difference. These things make the same essential for good therapy. And but Boss would say, all you got to do is be present. He was told to supervise this, and he would, in this teaching at the Das Heinz Analytic Institute, would talk about this, just mere presence. I don't think that's enough. I'm talking about presence, but I'm talking about disciplined, original presence. a kind of presence that you bring to a moment that you don't bring to any other moment in your life. Because every moment is unlike any moment in life. This moment is unlike any moment in my life. And in yours. I'm not saying it's good or bad or special or you should think highly of it. I'm just saying this is, this is the once and once only moment. This is the ontic world, the everyday world. Psychotherapy is an ontic enterprise. It's an enterprise of everyday life. It's not philosophy. Too many existential therapists talk philosophy in therapy, and that's not. Once in a while, you might have a philosophical conversation if the patient is suddenly interested in it, because it helps them to understand their experience better and manage it better. But I really disagree with Voss's idea of just mere presence. I think it's discipline and it's original presence. It's a presence that you bring it to this moment like no other moment, and it's disciplined. You have to listen and make sure you're hearing what they're saying, and then are you understanding what they're saying? And then those are two levels of real discipline to do that. And then there's also not only understanding, but being able to, what's the most important thing that's being said? What's the most important thing that's not being said? And then there's what does the person need to hear? Not what they want to hear from me, what they need to hear from me right now. And then how can I say that? Or even should I say that? I mean, these are all questions that are embodied in every single moment of therapy. That takes discipline. That takes study. That takes continual learning. I think it takes going back to therapy sometimes. It takes going to seminars. It takes experience of doing therapy, excuse my language, fucking up, and doing it again and correcting it, repairing those mistakes. Another thing about meditation is the idea in meditation is not so that you're supposed to be just be attentive to. You usually use what's called an anchor. Usually it's your breath. It might be your physical sensations, but usually it's your breath. And that's called the anchor. And so you pay attention to that, and then your mind wanders. And that's not bad. That's not bad. It's going to wander. That's what minds do. Just like minds misunderstand. They wander. And so the thing is that you just always come back to being present. Just there. Now, by the way, your mind also wanders in therapy. My mind wanders in therapy. When it does that, I catch it. Of course, I wonder then, this is another part of the discipline. Why was I suddenly thinking about that? What did the person just say? So that's another part of the discipline. So this is not just mere presence. This is a serious, challenging, demanding kind of presence. But it ought not to feel like a burden or a work. It ought to be joyful. Just like when you're meditating and your mind starts to wander. Oh, I see that my mind is wandering. Then you bring your mind back. It's the same thing. Oh, I did mess up. Or I don't understand what's going on. Okay, I'm aware of not understanding. Or I'm aware of not hearing what they said. And so the joy is in that kind of presence that is able to take in everything. To the extent that we're capable of. Okay, I'm going to stop. That's we could say a lot more about psychotherapy, but I'm wondering if there's any questions. How we do it? Oh my gosh, it's 12 o'clock already. I told Evgenia, and given the difficulty we had getting started, I've left another, as much as a half hour, but I don't expect at all that we'll go that long, but I have left that amount of time. So and I understand that you all have got lives and commitments, so you may have to leave. But I'm open to some questions about what I just said about psychotherapy. And guess what? We didn't even get to the part about life, which is we sort of touched on it along the way. But so, any questions about therapy? Anything that I said? Or comments? Maybe you have something you want to say about all this. Not just ask about all this. I love what Ram Dass said.
I would like to thank you deeply. Your presentation touched me very, very deeply, especially when you talk about the co-creation of this world of therapy. Mm. So yes, we are co-creating, which doesn't take a responsibility from us as therapists, after all you said. Nevertheless, it enlightens the patient. And I wanted to thank you deeply.
We hope.
Yeah, we hope. No, I mean the role of the patient.
Yeah,
the
I see. Yeah,
the change. We don't do the change.
That's right. That's right.
This is not we are enlightening the patient.
Right.
He has his own being there, who is working for himself because of the relationship, and as a result, or something else, we don't know. So I deeply thank you, Erik. This was great.
You're welcome, Katerina.
I'm sure I'll have many questions, but I'll sleep over them.
Okay.
And maybe I dream for a next seminar.
Yeah. You said something that reminded me of what's going on with two people that I've been seeing for some time now, and they have been thanking me. That one of them was this older woman that I talked about, and they're both doing something relatively similar right now, but they both were, saying thank you to me, and I said, this is just impossible without you. If you were not the kind of person that you are, we could not do this. You're being the kind of person you are is what makes this possible. So I thank you for what you're saying to me, but you need to know that, in fact, the research says that the biggest contributor to successful psychotherapy are the kind of commitment and interest and capacity of the individual in therapy. So, but it takes real courage to have real conversations, 1 hour a week or 2 or 3 hours a week, whatever it is. It takes a hell of a lot of nerve to want to be honest with yourself, with another human being right there participating. That takes courage.
Yes. And discipline from both parts, as you said.
Right. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I may jump in. I'm Evie. Hi, by the way. I've not seen you.
Hi, Evie. Hi.
I love this idea of spaciousness, and I just need to work with it. It reminds me of something Evgenia always used to say, that we are the containers.
Right.
Therapy, but it's just such a lovely idea that there is space to explore and time to explore.
Yeah.
It's a luxury to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And to just leave things outside and come and talk to a person who will really listen. And allow us to listen to us, to ourselves. Otherwise, how can you listen to yourself if no one is listening to you? Coronavirus has brought us too much in contact with ourselves, and it's too easy for us to dodge ourselves. So this permissive but disciplined spaciousness, I think, a wonderful idea to start thinking about. So thank you very much for that.
Yeah, thank you, Evie. Two things came to my mind. One was when you talked about the container, and Evgenia, and of course it's a nice word also. It's like that for and whatnot. But it just occurred to me when you used the word, I thought it's so important that the container be. It can be too tight.
Oh, absolutely.
And it can also be way too loose. So to find that, does this sweater fit just right? Is it too loose? Is it too tight? It's a nice term. The second thing that I thought of, Evie, was when I met Boss, I was so glad that he let me get to know him. I mean, let me have these times with him that I had, and I never imagined that they would be as involved as they were in the long run. But I remember feeling right at the very beginning, wow, he not only let me know him, but he let me show up in his life. He allowed me to be
me.
To be me in his presence. It's a kind of permission to be both ways.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's such a privilege. I'm glad you spoke about those things. It's a real privilege. I'm not saying it's always easy, but it's
no, not at all.
Yeah.
So thank you for me.
Yeah, thank you, Evie.
And thank you to Evgenia, who first proposed that to me. In Candili.
In Greece, all existential roads go back to Evgenia. But
very probably.
Lots of other people too. But any other questions or comments about therapy? Perhaps we've reached our existential moment.
I would like to ask something, if I may. My name is Anna. You gave a very nice term of transfer in design, and I was wondering, I like the meaning of carrying over across time, and I was wondering how easily is to get rid of these luggages that someone carries over time.
There are some things I don't think we get rid of. I think we minimize the role or their rule in our lives because we learn to be aware of them and we reply differently. We actually realize we've got some choice about this and about how we're going to reply. But there are some things, early childhood traumas, and then these transference patterns, they don't really disappear. You're just more able to keep them in check, notice them, be aware of them, not be ruled by them anymore. But they're also enjoyable, you know. They're not just, some of them are lead us to pain that's not necessary in our lives, the kinds of suffering that are not necessary. one of the first things that I learned from my analyst, this recent analyst, is you were talking about hurting other people. This is not being hurt by our relationships, but that we hurt other people. And he was saying, you know, there's no way you're not going to hurt other people. If you really care about them, if you're really engaged with them, love them, you're going to hurt them. They're going to hurt you. It's the necessary hurt that you want to minimize. The unnecessary hurt, the unnecessary hurt that you want to minimize. It's the same kind of thing with this. It's like, okay, so every relationship is going to be, as Freud said, you're never more vulnerable than when you love. So to love is to open yourself to pain, disappointment, whatever. But it's the unnecessary pain that we can really minimize and respond differently to. I don't know if that helps you, Anna.
Yes, well, thank you.
Thank you for coming, by the way. Yeah. This is our finitude. This comes right back to that existential. Oh my gosh, I grew up with that family.
Well, it was very nice of you to join us and spend these 2 hours with us and share your knowledge and your experience and all of your world. I think it is very useful to see someone who has such an experience be so open and so out there with your feelings. So
don't have much choice about it, I guess, but thank you so much for the privilege and the opportunity to have such a rich couple of hours.
It is just a pity that we weren't able to have you in live, because you would be here and we would have had a whole day seminar yesterday, and you would be a keynote speaker for of the conference.
Yeah.
But instead, we are satisfied with just the 2 hours.
Well, we would not only have that those times, we'd have the tavernas. Not under these circumstances, but we would. It's not come by. Yeah. I'm sorry about that too.
Thank you very much.
I feel you all there, so it's very, very special. Thank you.
Okay.
I would like to ask something. I don't know if you hear me.
If we did something short, because we are over time.
Can I ask something?
If it is short, if it's a short question, is it?
Yeah, yes, it's a short. Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm a student in psychology, so I don't have the knowledge as you have all the other people here. But I'm very close to this kind of analysis, and I would like to ask about the thing of the body, because you always talk about the body and how the body feels, and I don't know if a phenomenological analysis has the kind of body inside the analysis. I don't know if I express it, because I'm very close to Gestalt therapy somehow. I'm somehow close there, and I know that there is the phenomenological analysis inside Gestalt, but I also am very close to philosophy, and I hear you many times to say the body, and I would like to ask this, but I don't have the knowledge also, you know, I'm just a student.
Yeah. Well, just a couple of things about the body. It's for one thing, our bodies are not just limited to our physical bodies, you know, because I'm kind of Dasein's analyst. the embodying forth when I point to the roses, for example, and I'm bodying forth with you. So it's not there's not this kind of separation of the body from the world. But so that's one thing. The other thing is that I think the bodily engagement is very important, and I think there's this wonderful kind of new therapy in the East called forest bathing, and that engages the body in nature. And there are dance therapies and expressive therapies, but the freedom to be in one's own body, to let one's body show itself as itself, I think is really important. And it's one of the signs that psychotherapy is really having an impact, is that you just see the way the person lives in their body begin to change. Sometimes it takes a long time with certain kinds of conditions, but sometimes not. You remind me, though, and I'm sorry, we don't have more time to answer that, but you mentioned the word analysis, and I said I was going to say something about that. Analysis is not tearing things apart. It's not tearing things down. Heidegger pointed out that the word analysis was first used, the first place he found it was in Homer, where Penelope is weaving the shroud during the days and keeping the lovers away. And for her uncle's funeral, because they all want to marry her, because they think Odysseus is gone, and they want her money and property and position. And at night, she's unraveling this shroud that she's making. That unraveling is eneleuin, is the Greek word eneleuin. It's the same word that's used when you are an army and you undo the tents so you can move to another battle site. It's the same word where you unravel the ropes that hold the ship to the dock so it can take a journey. And it's the same word that's used in Greek for a slave when you undo the shackles. And that, of course, is the critical meaning for psychotherapy. And so it's unraveling something that's tied up in one way, unraveling it to free it for a greater purpose. So I just wanted to make that, it's not, I just wanted to, Dasein's analysis is not reducing things to ontologicals. It's freeing the living of the ontologicals. So
thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Hey, you're welcome. Evgenia, I know we're over time. Sorry we had all the problems at the beginning. And Katerina.
It's good that we were able to resolve it, that you were able to resolve it.
Yeah.
We got scared for a little bit, but it is okay.
We solved it. See, we repaired the rupture.
We repaired the rupture, right.
Fortunately, it was only a mechanical rupture.
So thank you and take care, please.
Okay, you too. Kali Nikta. Kali Nikta.
Bye, thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Dr. Erik. Bye.
Bye-bye. Oh, bye.
Bye. Thank you very much.
Εντάξει.
Όχι, ωραία, καληνυχτήσαμε.
Καληνύχτα.
Γεια σας.
Καληνύχτα, ευχαριστούμε πολύ.
Να κλείσω το meeting για όλους. Καληνύχτα. Αύριο το πρωί θα σας έρθει το άλλο στους εκπαιδευόμενους για τη συνέχεια.
Γεια.
Γεια σας.
Καληνύχτα.
Καληνύχτα.
Γεια σας.